Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the final round of the BMEL finale. This is Pool A. I'm your host, Paul TX141 Walsh, and alongside me in the commentary box is, if he can get himself off of mute.
Oh, my bad. Forgot to mute. Hello, everyone. Welcome on the stream. Hello. My name is Grady, and
It's
we
good.
are here on the track of Le Mans for the final Binome Manufacturer Endurance League by GTS-BOCA TV.
It's good to have you alongside me, Grady, and we've got an absolutely exciting race tonight. I believe we have got a battle for the finale in terms of the championship, and who's going to walk away with that all-important top spot on the driver's standings. And I believe it's a four-way fight between TFZ Medi and a couple of the other drivers.
Yes, but I don't know. I don't have the information badly, but there is a fight for the final. Yeah, so I think it's with Beaver Jagger and international driver Pero Loco.
But
I'm not sure.
we do have a number of drivers who are looking to essentially finalise their positions, if not going for the overall championship win, to earn themselves a spot within that top five. And there's some major contenders in here today. I mean, some of you will be watching will know from watching any FIA top split race, particularly in the World Finals, you'll see one driver running under the name of Peroloco, also known as Fabian Portilla from Chile, a regular in the Nations Finals and also, I believe, occasionally in the manufacturers, but you see him a lot in Nations. And we've also got some other guests from series, such as Plux the Duck, which some of our viewers will know from the Ace Lift Design Endurance Championship, and also TX3's Dawson. Those guys are running together from the United Kingdom, being the only two British representatives here. And then we've got, obviously, Fabian Portilla from Chile, and we've then got the rest of our drivers all coming from France. Mehdi being a big name on the French GT Sports scene. You'll typically see him at the front of the grid in a top split race in FIA, but don't count out any of our other drivers here. We've got a huge variety of individuals.
That's right. So I'm very excited for the race that we'll have this night. We're going to watch something very great. That's for sure.
Definitely. Now, also on top of that, don't just think about the drivers' championship. We also have the constructors' championship, where we have got a two-way fight for the overall standings between Aston Martin, as represented by Medi_59, and also Kimi. Those guys lining up on the front row, and then behind them in P4 and P5, we've got representatives for Citroen. But outside of the two manufacturers, I think we've also got quite a representation of cars here. We've got also other cars such as Lamborghinis here. I think we've also got Jaguars running around on the circuit.
I had to change something real quick.
Okay.
There we go. No, normally I'm good now. I'm good for the stream. All right. Okay.
Okay. Apologies, folks. Just had a very minor technical issue, but we've cleared that now. So, in terms of what you can expect tonight, so it's my understanding we go straight into the racing at what will be approximately 8 o'clock Greenwich Mean Time or UTC. It won't be qualifying as such. This is how our drivers will line up then. We've got Mehdi and Kim on the front row. Then we've got Seb and Hack on the second row. On the third row, we've then got Ram and Jay, representing Citroen and Corvette. On the fourth row, we've got Mercedes, a line up alongside Aston Martin. Then we've got Plux the Duck and Karma on the fifth row. Then BRT Tenchu and Cobra on the sixth row. And then Transor Light and Paraloco on the final row, representing Viper and Corvette. We're just clearing some of the technical issues out of the way and waiting to get on the way very gradually.
Yes.
But given that it's going to be racing at Le Mans with the chicanes, no problem. We are back out on circuit here. And what we can see is we're just riding on board with our safety car driver, who the safety car is being driven this evening by BFR's Milka. Well, he's just taking us around the circuit at the moment, running around in the Mercedes AMG, making a bit of a hand fist there of Tetra Rouge, but still just going around to give us and all of our representing viewers just a representation of the lap here in terms of what to expect and what not to expect. As we can see, some of our other drivers are also just running around the circuit, doing a couple of quick pace laps before we get underway with tonight's action. But as you can see, is Circuit de la Sarthe with the chicanes. Now, from your experience, Grady, you got any thoughts in terms of the cars being raced tonight and who's going to be the stronger car here?
I may think the Corvettes. I mean, they are really fast in the straight lines. Maybe a little bit slow in the corners, but I think they will be the favorites in this time of track. So yeah, I'm looking forward for the Corvettes to do something on this track.
Oh, definitely. And I think the Corvette has a huge advantage over the race distance, because if this was a race just based around, a sprint where there's no pit stops or any need to worry about fuel, then, well, the Corvette would be strong. But the thing is, when you've got fuel considered, the Corvette being powered by a V8 supercharger, what it means is that the Corvette drivers can upshift at a much lower RPM, and particularly down the straights, that will enable them to do a huge amount of fuel saving. As we can see, our safety car almost drifted off into the gravel there at the second chicane of Mulsanne.
Maybe he's a little bit drunk.
Yeah, a little bit too early on the festivities. But I think one other one to watch out for here will be the Aston Martins, because if they're running the Aston Martin GT3 V12 Vantage, that car has absolutely sensational straight line speed because of its engine. But outside that, I think every manufacturer that's represented here does have a very good chance. The Citroens are also going to be very strong through the second half of the circuit, the Citroen being that mid-engine rear-wheel drive configuration, giving it very good handling characteristics. The only thing our Citroen drivers have to watch out for, of course, is the fact that they do have a bit of a straight line deficit, but then again, they do have some phenomenal fuel-saving capacity, what of them having the access to a 7th gear, something that most of the other manufacturers represented tonight do not have. Who's, in your opinion, Grady, in terms of the drivers, who should we keep our eyes out for today? Is it Fabian Portilla or is it any other guys around here?
Mady is also a strong guy. He's also very fast. So maybe I think let's look at Mady. Mady will do something here. I'm definitely sure, and also because I mean he's racing for the championship, so he will definitely do his best.
Oh, definitely. I mean, we know from seeing Mehdi racing in FIA that he's an incredibly strong contender. He's always up towards the front of the top split races, and I believe he's featured in a number of top 16 superstar races as well. Another person I wouldn't count out here, or two drivers I wouldn't count out, would be our British contingent, Plux the Duck and Dawson. Dawson having recently made the switch to TX3 from, I believe, what was previously Vanquish Esports. Dawson has a huge amount of pace, and also Plux shouldn't be counted out, just simply for the fact that on a personal level, I know how fast he can be in the GT3 machinery. It's a good mix of drivers, though.
What you also have to know is they have to take three sets of tires. So they will have to pick the hard one, the medium, and the soft ones. So there is a lot of strategy that will be placed in this race also.
Oh, definitely. And in terms of the race distance, I believe we're looking at 2 hours today, 2 hour endurance?
Yes, 2 hours of endurance, yes.
Which, a circuit as legendary as Le Mans, what it can effectively mean. As we can see, Milka decided to now do a 180 at the chicane. Is effectively over the 2 hours, whilst all of our drivers are very professional and they put in a lot of time and practice into these events, 2 hours is absolutely wearing on the body. I mean, after an hour of racing, your legs start to go, your arms start to feel weak, but 2 hours, just painful.
I mean, this is a 6th race, so I think that the drivers are used now to the pain and yeah, I think it will be fine.
I agree with you there. I'm sure they're used to it by now. Let's say it'll be Aston Martin's lining up on that front row, and I think, well, they're going to be strong, but BFR Harkone, one thing about the Citroen is it's got one of the strongest launches off the line, assuming whether it's a grid start, alternatively a rolling start. It's got very quick acceleration and lower gears. We could see him getting into the mix pretty much immediately. And we've also got the Mercedes here, which is a strong all-round car, the AMG machine. And on top of that, the Nissans, which I believe very strong down the straights, but they did receive a bit of a balanced performance change in recent months by Polyphony Digital.
A big one, a big one. It's I'm a Nissan fan driver, you know. I'm always taking the GTR, and I can tell you that it's a big change. It's really slow now.
So when you say it's become slow, is it just in terms it takes much longer to get up to top speed, or is it just general they've cut the straight line speed of it?
It takes very when it's doing the fifth gear, you know, then it's going very slowly, and then he has to catch up, you know, and then
Yeah. Meanwhile, whilst Nissan got heavily nerfed, you could say that Dodge Viper, well, they've come leaps and bounds. I mean, I don't think anybody used to even consider racing for Dodge in the manufacturer series of FIA, and now it's one of the go-to manufacturers in 2020. But we're jumping back on board with the safety car, and I think this time Milk has decided to clear both the chicanes. Now he's coming up to the Mulsanne corner and just heading around here. Just burning down the time really, and giving us an idea of the sort of lap that we can expect. Of course, he won't be going as fast as some of our drivers will be today, particularly down the Mulsanne. Well, I think we're going to be expecting speeds of up to, I'd say, about 170 miles an hour if you're in a slipstream.
I think something like that, yeah.
As he just comes out the Mulsanne and now goes down onto the Gulf Straight. We're going to be getting the formation lap underway within the next 2 minutes by the sounds of things. That should be good to have all of our drivers out on track and ready to form up. But just whilst we're waiting for things to get underway, if you don't mind, Grady, just take us a little bit through the year so far in terms of, you say there's been 6 races. How long has this series going on? How long has this series been going on for?
It's if I'm not wrong, it's the 6th season already that we are doing this kind of events. And, yeah, it's getting known by international teams, and it's very good to see that the community and that event is going much bigger than expected, actually. So.
Yeah, it's great to see, particularly when one of the things about GT Sport is the fact that obviously you have the FIA championships fully endorsed and that, but it's got great potential to open up other community championships, which, as you say, grow bigger and bigger, and they start to hit the international level. And well, this is just an example. I mean, we're broadcasting in, I believe, 2 different languages tonight. One broadcast in French and one in English, which is ours. But who knows what 2021 could hold for the championship, particularly when GT7 arrives and everyone starts to make their transition.
What I know is that season 7 will still be played. Will do on the GT Sports.
Mm-hmm.
So season 7 will do on GT Sport, and then we will see with the future on GT7 if the Binome Manufacturer will still be going on, you know. So yeah, a lot of surprises also.
Oh, definitely, and I know everybody's waiting around at the moment to know when GT7 is going to be arriving. As we can see, it looks like Milk has completely ham-fisted the first of the 4 chicanes. Well, I think our safety car's a bit of a danger car, in all honesty.
He's definitely having some fun.
Oh, he's definitely enjoying himself, but I think he's going to get a track reset if he's not too careful. But I know a number of our drivers at the moment are holding off buying their PlayStation 5s, waiting to know when GT7's coming. I'm in that pool as well. I'm only going to get the PlayStation 5 when GT7 finally arrives. But a lot to look forward to. But so whilst I think we're almost ready to go, I think some of our major battle points will be, of course, the opening chicane, which we've just gone through, the Dunlop chicane. And then also, well, the Mulsanne Straight's going to lend a huge number of slipstream battles. And I believe that means we're about to get the race underway. Correct me if I'm wrong?
Yeah. Now the safety.
Alrighty, well,
It will be one lap with the safety car, and then we will start the actual race.
well, you heard it, folks, from my colleague. Our safety car is going to go round at the head of the pack for the parade lap, and then we get underway. So 1 tour lap, and then we're back to the grid, and everything will kick off. And we're just going to follow the safety car around, and hopefully he'll be able to make it in one piece.
Hopefully, otherwise it will be a big troll. Someone is saying, safety car, the most secure place is where it isn't.
Yeah, some of our viewers are already getting into the spirit of all the random shenanigans of our safety car driver. As you can see, just running his way up towards turn 1, and behind him, everyone's queuing up at the moment, Mehdi being that lead driver in the queuing pack. As I believe we've got the little camera in the left-hand side of your screen there as well, just giving you a slightly delayed picture of all the cars running behind the safety car, all forming into a line, much like Noah's Ark. We're going 2 by 2, hurrah, hurrah, up to each corner and down the straights. And, well, I think a lot of our drivers here will put in a huge amount of practice, but it won't hurt for every driver to get one more lap just to get all their brake points sighted in and just to get themselves psychologically set up. As they all come down the Moleston straight now, you can see the huge queue forming up behind the safety car, and Mehdi and Kimi just giving each other a gentle tap on the side there. It's great to see them all forming up together, all coming down on the Moleston straight. You can see in that bottom left, that camera shot there in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen, ladies and gentlemen, just all the different machines that we've got here today. And as Grady said, keep an eye out for those Corvettes. We suspect they are going to charge up through the field as the race goes on, particularly on the straights here, where that Corvette is so strong. Now, of course, Le Mans being one of those infamous tracks where legends are made. One of the Group C legends of Le Mans, particularly Mazda 787B. And also in more recent years, we have seen a number of legendary events, particularly the resurgence of what I believe was, correct me if I'm wrong, a record was broken in, not this year, but last year. I think it was the first time a Japanese car had won Le Mans in a very long time. I think Toyota won it in 2019, if I'm not mistaken. But as we come up to in 2018, I had it clarified by a super fan of Le Mans, who I know in the chat, and it was 2018. As they're now coming down to the third part of the straight then. Really just eager to get underway now. And I think in the driver's perspective, and I think you'll agree with me, Grady, all of them are probably just itching right now and saying, why is the safety car here? Can't it just get out of the way and can't we get racing?
Everyone is waiting for just to finish the safety lap and then just race. You know, I mean, they want to win the championship. I mean, it's the last one, and they want to give everything for it. So
very true. And I'll be honest, from speaking of my own experience, when you go out on these opening laps, one of the things about them is obviously you got to do it, but the part of you is just absolutely screaming. You want to get things underway. You do not want to be sat there for too long because you've got an itch to scratch, and that itch to scratch is putting your foot through the floor and going full throttle. But not too long now as they're coming down towards Indianapolis after the second kink of the Gulf Straight. Alrighty, well, as they're coming out of what is our nudge now. Obviously, we've got that little bit of a delay on the backup camera, but it's not too far delayed. In fact, we're flicking it over the top right now. I think the idea behind this is we can use this camera, the third-person camera, in order to get a full view of the grid and how things get underway, rather than riding on board with one particular driver, which is absolutely perfect. We want to see everybody. We don't want to just see the perspective of one driver throughout. But I'm sure many of the drivers here tonight are live streaming their perspectives. But really, any final thoughts before we get around to the grid to get underway, Grady?
Sorry.
Any final thoughts from yourself?
I mean, I'm just I will just watch, and I'm looking forward to watch this show. So not really.
Oh. So they're all coming up to the Porsche curves. Now, wonderful camera angles, of course, available to us in GT Sport. Very well placed, giving us a full view of everything that's happening. As they're all just coming through. Yep, everything's good here.
On n'a pas le son.
Okay, so that is the safety car docking into the pits now, ladies and gentlemen, and that means we are going to be underway for the 2-hour endurance race as all of our drivers come across the line to complete the formation lap. And now it's complete. We will be moving into the 2-hour event. But not long now to go, folks. And our stewards who are hosting lobby are just checking all the specs to make sure that everything is set accordingly in terms of tyre wear, fuel consumption, the tyres that our drivers have to use. That way, nobody gets caught out and everybody is racing the race they've been practicing for. Now we just await confirmation and get underway as we follow Tenchu around in the GTR. Nicknamed Godzilla for the fact it used to be absolutely monstrous on the straights, and it's had a huge amount of that straight line speed, as my colleague was saying earlier, taken away from it. But the GTR's not to be underestimated. Where it's lost out on the straights, it still does very well.
Yeah, I think everyone is doing the medium tires. I think see a couple of drivers starting with medium, so interesting to see. Maybe to get rid of it, and then take the hard tires, and then really soft to end the race with.
Definitely, I think that's a key point you made there. The fact that the soft tyre around here, I think, is going to be approximately 2 seconds, or not 2 seconds, probably about at least 1.5 seconds faster than the medium over a complete lap. But of course, the medium has that greater durability. But ideally, you want to be on the fastest tyre for as long as possible because it will naturally give you the greatest pace advantage. But again, pit stops here are costly at Le Mans in the fact that it is, if I remember correctly, about 12 seconds for a pit stop with just the tyre change. And if you put fuel in, it's much longer.
Yep, that's right. 12 seconds.
All of our drivers have got a couple of minutes before we get the proceedings going at 1/4 the hour, so we've got just under 2 minutes.
And hello everyone to the people watching the stream also. Thank you for being here.
And we just had a word in to say that Dawson just needs to restart some of his equipment, which is why you saw him leave the race group, and he will be coming back in one moment. Unfortunately for us here, in terms of doing sim racing, this not being real world racing, although I know a number of our drivers would pretty like to be out on the circuit in real life right now, we can reset the technology when things break rather than having to bin a whole car and build a new one.
And hello, Balding. Welcome to stream.
And we can see
You will enjoy the show, big show.
so that's actually a question from Balding. Is there tuning allowed in this championship?
No, it's not allowed.
So it's purely done on the balance of performance as set by the FIA.
Yes.
Because one of the things that we did note in some other leagues where I've taken part in Group 3s, where balance of performance on and tuning is allowed as well, it completely changes the dynamic of some of the cars. I mean, what's seen as perhaps one of the weaker cars within the current balance of performance regulations, the Aston Martin DBR9 GT1, becomes an absolute monster once you start allowing tuning, because it's one of those cars where you can tune out all the understeer and you can make it just flow through the corners. But in these conditions, the Aston Martin will be a bit of an understeery monster, whereas other cars will be a little bit more flexible.
Also, the thing is, not everyone has expertise with tuning, you know. So I mean, it's quite fair that it's not allowed for this race quite equal.
That's true. And we're being asked as well, do our drivers get to choose their manufacturer?
Well, how we start is, so you begin with qualification session. So then everyone has to choose. Everyone gets one car, you know, and then you have to do a upgrade. And then if that is done, you can choose a car you want to compete with.
Which is great, because it means that you're not locked into a manufacturer literally from day one, but you have to get through the qualification stages and then you're set to a manufacturer.
Right.
But there we go. There is the announcement, folks. We are about to get underway with our main event for tonight. 2 hours. By the end of it, who will come out on top? So as all of our drivers line up for the starting procedure, it is, of course, going to be a rolling start at Le Mans. On the front is our TFC driver, a TFC Medi 59, and behind him, Kimi 6599. Both drivers representing Aston Martin there, and behind them, you've got Severance in the GTR from Nissan. So our drivers are just waiting for the rolling start to kick off. Bit of a difficult rolling start here, in the fact, depending on where you've qualified, you may find yourself starting on the start-finish straight or midway through the chicane. And it's lights out and away they go. So our drivers kicking off, and well, we take a look over at the stream cameras, we can see that they're all charging down towards turn number 1 as per usual. Our Aston Martin drivers already getting a bit of a head start through the delay going up into the start finish straight on the rolling start, but nobody really close to each other at this point. It's quite spaced out already, but I'm sure they're going to be closing up. And we can see that already, in fact, our two Citroen drivers of, well, what is Hakone and also Ramuccio, running quite close together, and I think they're trying to use one another as a slipstream train down the straight here. And as Ramuccio comes out of Tetra Rouge and onto the Mulsanne straight for the first time, I've asked him, it will be multiple times tonight. You can definitely see, as it looks as though actually, who's that? It's Karma69 who has picked up a penalty for track limits there, a 1 second penalty. That surely must have been coming through into Tetra Rouge there. He's picked up that penalty. And where will he have to burn that? Does he just burn that under braking, or is there a designated burn zone?
You can burn it on every lap, but you have to do it in one lap. So he gets one lap, and there's and there is some places, I don't know what place, but I think it's the late, the straight lines where he has to purge it.
Yes. So with that, that means our drivers can be a little bit tactical in terms of where they choose to burn the penalty, so long as it's within the constraints defined there. But that's the good thing as well, is the fact that our drivers will have to take responsibility for the penalties they accrue, and we can already see that in fact that Peroloco or Fabien Portier has moved up to P13. He has got past Francois on the opening lap, and now going after Cobra 45 as they're coming up into the second chicane. I think he's going to have the move done here in the Corvette, already jumping the Dodge Viper driver. And he's definitely got that place now, and I think at the moment the Dodge Viper guys are running the medium tyres, so I think they're perhaps just running things a little bit slow at this point and just running a bit off of the optimal pace as we ride on board with Fabien and see that with the Corvette upshifting nice and early here, trying to maximise his fuel, and now chasing after Tenchu 12, who's ahead of him and running around in the GTR. And you can see he is gradually gaining, but that GTR, once it's got up into 6th gear, very strong at the top end of the straight as they now come onto the Gulf Straight. As they're pushing down towards the Gulf Straight, it's really Fabien being on a charge here as we're looking at further around the grid here and looking more towards the front. I think we've got a move on here. Alcone coming up close behind Severance, and well, Severance is doing all he can at the moment. The Citroen's just not able to get close enough to affect the move into Indianapolis. I think for a number of the, well, for Ramucho in particular, he'll love this because he's getting a double toe. He's getting a 2-for-1 special on the straights. Is now charging up towards the Porsche curves here. If you're in Ramucho's shoes, would you go for a move here, Grady, or would you just simply sit back and observe?
I would just sit back and observe, and I mean, shifting early, you know, because you're sitting in the slipstream, and then it's a big advantage for
Oh, definitely. And I think with that slipstream, it gives him the opportunity to do a lot of fuel saving, but there will come a point in his overall race strategy where he'll think that running behind these two is costing him time, and he'll either expect Harcone to get a move on, or alternatively, he'll have to do it himself. But behind, you can see that Dawson already going up to 6th place, and in the Aston Martin, doing a good job of fending off Jaeger and Nanika as they're coming up to the end of lap number 1. And already, by the looks of things, we've got Nanika into the pits, and Nanika started on the medium, so that would explain why he's jumping into the pits.
He wants to get rid of the tires and just maybe take the hard ones or the softs. I don't know what the strategy will be, but I think he will take the hard ones maybe to get rid of it.
So,
and then, sorry?
I was going to say, it's coming on to that point. So really, if our drivers only need to run one lap on each tyre compound, then what we can probably expect is...
Yeah, so if you just have to do one lap with the 3 tires set, and then you can get 3 cars, plus that you can do whatever you want to do.
Well, that would be interesting.
Yeah, go on.
Because I think what you'll see is some drivers, such as Plux here, who's decided to go an extra lap on the medium. I think some of the drivers here will decide to use the medium for its full duration and try and stay in the slipstream of another driver, and that's exactly what Plux is doing. What you can see is running behind the GTR, the Aston Martin V12 has the straight line speed to match the GTR until they hit 6th gear. That's when the GTR pulls a little bit of legroom, but not much. But it means so long as he can keep behind the Frenchman in front of him, the British driver will not be losing out by running on the medium in this race. Alternatively, it could be that Svens has decided to go for the medium as well. But it's all chop and change as Plux is getting closer and closer to the back of Svens, but then lifts out of it before braking. He's playing it smart here. And as they're coming down the second part of the Mulsanne, I think one of the key things to note as well is that Plux is doing some early upshifts, so he's not using the maximal gear range here. He is upshifting a little bit early, and he's going for a move against Sevens, and I think Sevens isn't going to fight this one.
And I can feel the frustration of FT7s on the straight lines. I mean, it's very painful to see video that's no straights.
Yeah, definitely. I think he's playing it smart here, just deciding to hook in. Will there be an early upshift from Sevens? He's got the ability to go all the way up to 7,000 RPM, and that's quite an early upshift. He didn't have to upshift that early. So doing a little bit of fuel saving and coming back at Plux now as they're starting to hit the top end, and a little bit of a bump on the backside for Plux, probably trying to tell the British driver to get a move on down the straight. As they're coming out of the Mulsanne corner and now onto the Gulf Straight here. And meanwhile, up front, it is still a Mehdi ahead of Kimi and Ramuccio. Well, Ramuccio has moved up into third place, we should point that out. So there has been some change up front. In fact, Ramuccio has got all the way up there, but I think that's due to people taking early pit stops, with Hakone dropping down to P5 and Dawson finding himself in a very comfortable P4 right now. Because we've got a very long way to go here. It's not as though it's going to be over in the next 10 minutes. We've still got an hour and 53 minutes. I think in terms of the opening strategy then, so we see that Dawson is on the medium right now. Can we expect Dawson to come in at the end of this lap? Personally, I think if Dawson feels as though he's on a strong one here, he probably won't be pitting forced on tyre. I think he'll try and use that medium for the distance rather than just use it as a mandatory tyre. As he goes for the move on Ramuccio here, and you can see he's just got so much straight line speed by comparison to that Citroen. The Citroen just does not have the speed once it gets into the upper gears. And behind that means that Ramuccio now is going to essentially get caught up in the little trolley train of what is Dawson holding up 3 other cars, unless Dawson can break away. And Dawson will have a gamble here, which is he either has to really put the foot down and try and pull away and break the tow, that tow distance being 0.8 seconds because of the standardized slipstream. Alternatively, he'll find himself pulling 3 other cars along, and they can all just choose to fuel save behind the Aston Martin as Dawson's into the pits. So I think this is the right move from Dawson. What about yourself, Grady? Do you think this is the right move, or do you think he should have stayed out longer?
I think he should maybe stay out. I mean, he was gaining on a little bit on Kimi, so he could just stay out and just go on with the mediums, and then maybe follow the thread that Kimi and Mehdi.
And we can see that with Dawson pitting, that does open up for Ramuccio and Hakone feeling a significant amount of pressure from Jaeger at the moment. Jaeger is all over the back of him. And hold on a second, I think Ramuccio has picked up a penalty for cutting track limits at the Dunlop chicane. I think on the apex of turn 3. And Hakone, well, that's going to be frustrating for the Frenchman because, well, his countryman ahead of him will fall behind him when he burns that penalty, most likely. And going off the circuit is Jaeger. He's gone wide but kept it together. He hasn't put it into the wall, but he is going to have dirty tyres to come protect your origin. He's going to have to be careful as he picks up an extra half second for that runoff there. I think it looks like he probably just carried too much momentum through the right hander before leading up. Yeah, but he has. And it's so easy to do that when particularly when you're in the dirty air of the car in front of you. You just simply feel the nose of your car not respond to your input, and now he's going to have to burn a huge penalty, and that's going to drop him well off the chase pace, as now Stevens is going to have a slipstream partner in the form of Jaeger as they're going through the first of the chicanes down the main straight.
The track is looking so easy, but the penalties in this are very, very hard. It's extremely hard and painful. So you go many times on the guys in front of you.
Oh, definitely. And I think that's one of the things here. It's not just going to be about who's the fastest driver around the circuit. It's also going to be who's the cleanest driver in terms of avoiding those penalties. Because as you say, you lose so much time when you have to take a penalty on any of these straights that you can't afford to. I mean, to give our viewers an idea, if a driver's got a 1 second penalty down the Mulsanne straight, you burn that 1 second penalty, that in fact is probably worth about a 2 to 2.5 second penalty, because the straight, you're coming from about 160 miles an hour, let's say, down to 130. As you can see there, Mehdi has actually had to take a penalty coming out the Mulsanne corner, and we've got a new race leader in the form of Kimi. And look at the fact that as Mehdi gets himself now back up to speed, look at that gap, how much it's opened up because of that penalty. That's about 4 seconds that's opened up between the pair of them through one penalty. But Mehdi and Kimi pulling away. Sorry, go on.
Like you said, it's the most efficient, the most clean driver that will win this race. Definitely not getting any penalties.
But outside of the penalty situation, so our 2 Aston Martin drivers up front are definitely pulling away. Ramuccio at this point feeling some pressure from Hakone, and Jaeger falling off a little bit. Now, whether it's just simply because Jaeger had a bit of a bad moment at the start of lap number 3 and he's decided, you know what, I'm just need to cool it down for the rest of this lap, which is worth doing because he can keep up with these guys in front of him. He's only 1.3 seconds off of the chaser P3, and behind him he's got Sarthe, who's not gaining too much, and you can see Sarthe losing out in that straight line race now, coming up into the Porsche curves for the third time of asking, and you've got a little bit of a gap to tend to. So our drivers forming up into little packs at the moment. I think they're all going to be thinking about how they can work together here to close the gap up to our leaders, who are now 24 seconds ahead of, say, P9, with Nanika being our P9 driver right now. We'll go through the Porsche curves once again then. You can see that Nanika getting closer and closer to the back of Francois Light. And I think the Dodge Viper driver here is struggling a little bit through the Corvette curves. He's just not holding as much pace as the Mercedes driver behind him. And well, if you're looking for a car that's an all-rounder within the front-engine rear-wheel drive class in GT3, that Mercedes AMG is very strong in most regards. Whereas the Dodge Viper, it's been improved as Jaeger has come into the pits and drops all the way from P5 down to what I think is going to be in the region of this battle right now. We'll have to wait and see where he comes out of the pits, as all of our drivers are not marginal on fuel right now. They've still got a lot of fuel available to them. I think Nanika's looking for the move here on the Dodge driver. He's just not getting it at the moment. He's getting closer and closer. He's breathing down the neck of Francois, and I think Francois is feeling that pressure. I think there's going to be a move on very shortly, because you can see Nanika is just all over the back of him. He's running on the softs, to be fair, and I think Francois is running on the medium by comparison, which would explain the gap. But yeah, coming through Tetrarucci, surely it's going to be. And Francois has already turned on his indicator light. He said to Nanika to go to the left.
He knew already that just pass me, you know. I mean, I'm just going to follow you in the slipstream and give you the speed.
As they're coming down here, it's a drag race, and the Dodge, because of its recent balance of performance buff, you can see it's actually pulling back ahead of Nanika here.
That's the speed of the Viper.
That Viper is so strong down straights, but yep, Francois has decided to brake early.
Yeah, he has to.
But I bet from Francois' perspective, he was probably thinking to himself, okay, Nanika can just get past. Oh, wait a minute, now I'm outrunning him. I'm going to have to find a way of letting him through. So that might have unsettled him a little bit. But we could also see that Loco in P12 at the moment. And we've got Jaeger, who's come out right at the back of a huge train of cars here, all the way down in P11. But he's gone to the soft, so this should be easy pickings in terms of getting past both Cobra and also Karma. As they come out into the second chicane, then will he go for the double move here, or just the one? Just the one this time. And he's going to have to do it all again coming up into the Mulsanne corner and getting past the Mercedes driver. I think the Corvette's going to have the legs here, and he upshifts very early.
Even on the slipstream, he's way faster than the Mercedes, so but almost 9.
And he goes, he's going for the move, and I think this is going to be one of your typical passes as you're coming into the kink, and then Karma has slammed on the brakes nice and early, so just to cut his momentum. And Jaeger going very deep on the corner. I'm wondering whether he's actually going to be on track limits. I think he just got it back on the curb in time, and now he has got Karma all over the back of him. I think Karma is just wanted to push him along at this point. I don't think he's going to go for the move. He's on worn softs. Although he is taking a little peek, but that might just be to simply bleed off some of the speed he's getting from running in the slipstream and literally sniffing the back side of the Corvette in front of him. Coming up into Indianapolis, and he has backed off, and we see that Dawson, having taken that pit stop on lap number 2, is now back in P13 and chasing after the Chevrolet Apera Loco in front of him. And he is on a personal best right now in terms of lap time here, as they're coming out of Arnage. And well, I think the Aston Martin, whilst it's going to have the legs here, it is going to struggle to get past the pair in front, simply because they've all got the slipstream of one another, and then you've got that very fast Dodge Viper at the head of the train. As we jump to the onboard with the Aston Martin driver here, and you can see that Chevrolet has pulled it out of the slipstream because he doesn't want to carry the understeer into the initial Porsche curves, but Dawson is getting very, very close under braking here, and I think he is going to try and size up a move. Surely he's got to, because this is costing him a huge amount of time in terms of race pace for now. As they come through the Chevrolet curves, then you can see that Dawson going for a bit of a cutback in terms of how he sized himself up going into the entry point for that corner. And we've also got a good number of our drivers who are up front coming into the pits. Ramucho, Hakone, they both come in, which means Nanika is now promoted to P3. He's jumped all the way up into P3, but of course Nanika has yet to take a pit stop. So that means that everybody is a little bit out of order at the moment, and we're going to have to wait until everything settles down after a first round of pit stops in order to see where everybody comes out. But Hakone I believe he must be putting in some fuel. And he's gone to the hard tyre. He's not putting fuel, he's just simply gone to the hard tyre and dropped all the way down to P11. And this hard tyre lap is going to be punishing for the driver. You lose about 3 seconds versus the soft as a minimum. And that's if you can get the hard turned on, because it's such a hard tyre, if you excuse the pun here, to actually warm up. It takes about a lap just to get the hard warmed up.
I don't think he will stay on the hard tyre. I just think he will get rid of it and just go on to the soft ones. Finish with all the way with the softs.
Definitely. I agree with you 100% there. You don't want to be on that hard tyre if you can afford not to be. You just want to get it out the way. And that's one of the things. It's the mantra of the FIA races and probably races that we've seen earlier on in this season. It's just simply get rid of the worst tyre as soon as possible and then go charging onto that soft tyre and just literally rip every bit of pace that you can out of that tyre. Abuse it as much as you can. As we can see, Tenchu currently running in P13, a little bit of a lonely existence for the Nissan GTR driver here. 3.2 seconds off of Plux the Duck and 4.8 seconds ahead of Sarthe. But then again, it could all toss and turn, it could change, as I believe that Tenchu is also running on the hard at this point, so he's going to be wanting to get this out of the way because he's currently on an out lap, so it'll probably be just a single lap, come into the pits, put a bit of fuel in potentially, and then get back out there. Because I think all of our drivers are starting to come towards the end of their opening fuel tanks. Although Sarthe, actually, we should point out, put in a full fuel tank when he pitted from being right up front, so that's why he's so far down. But in Nanika at the moment, going the longest and actually using that soft tyre very well at this point, finding himself 23, almost 24 seconds off of our race leaders. But still, Nanika just having a quiet race up front, not getting too heavily involved. His pace isn't too bad, hitting back-to-back 355s, which isn't a bad lap around here. And I think the Frenchman will be happy with this opening stint, but surely this opening stint will be coming to an end soon. As you can see that car just wobbling a little bit under braking there. Oh, and we've almost got missed. Karma almost losing it there, coming out of the Mulsanne corner.
Something bad almost happened there. Yeah.
We're just going to switch back, and I think as we ride on board with it, I think here he just simply got too adventurous with his throttle pedal, running a bit deep. So we're just going to see him under braking as he comes in then, coming down to second gear, and as he's rotated the car through.
Imagine having a damage there. My God, that's a big loss.
It is definitely a huge loss for the driver, and it means now within effect that he's going to have to find another way around in terms of building up that pace once again. And that's one of the things our drivers have to be aware of as well. As soon as the tyres start to go off on these cars, well, any of the curbs here, whether it's the apex curve, alternatively the exit curve, the tight right-handers or left-handers such as Arnage, well, they can be very punishing if you have used that throttle pedal too much. You just simply end up lighting up the tyres too soon, and then you go off into the wall or off to Narnia, or I off into the woodland. But Paraloco making his way up into P6, yet to take a pit stop, and we do have our race leaders both coming in at the moment, coming in on lap number 5 to come off the softs, and I think they're going to go for a complete refill of the fuel tank, or perhaps just the one lap if they're going to get the medium or the hard out of the way now. They've got the gap to be fair, because they've pitted with approximately 25 seconds lead over P3. Nanika coming along now, and is Nanika going to pit? Yep, he comes into the pits as well. It's his scheduled opening stop off the soft tyre, and Jaeger coming in, and Francois.
Oh, everyone is going back to the pit actually.
Yeah, everyone's making their mandatory visit to the pit, so will anybody come out right at the front? I think Dawson isn't going to come into the pits right now because he pitted significantly earlier, and I think as Ramucho has switched onto the hard tyre, we've got Kimi coming back out in front of Mehdi, and then Dawson burning that penalty is going to find himself creeping up into P3 once this all chops and changes. And then Plux the Duck in P4 at the moment, Sarthe in P5. So that's how it all shapes up. And well, in terms of the strategy after the first round of pit stops, Dawson gaining a huge round, as has Plux. I think these drivers have sort of crept through the field by simply going on to a bit of a different strategy compared to everyone else.
We should not forget that the Kimi and Mehdi with medium or hard tires yet. They went again on softs. So, I mean, Dawson has the advantage here, I would say, because he already passed mediums, I guess. With the mediums, so you just
Yes.
need to take the hard time.
Yeah, so that's one thing which, for our viewers, you may be wondering at the moment, okay, so as a driver, you've got to get 3 compounds out the way. When do you choose to get the 2 compounds, i.e. the medium and the hard, which offer you less pace and really not optimal pace here? When do you choose to get them out of the way? Now, you've seen some drivers, such as Dawson, for example, and also Clark's, run, say, the medium for 1 lap early on in the race, or 2 laps, as we saw in the opening for both Clark's and Dawson, and then they've gone to a set of softs. When do you choose to do that? Well, the thing about it is that if you're up towards the front, so if you're, say, in Kimi or Medi's shoes right now, what you can argue is that you technically have a greater choice available to you, because you could choose to run the soft for the opening hour and just focus on, within that hour, building as much of a gap as you possibly can. And I think that's what Kimi and Medi are both going for right up front. As we can see, Cobra is going to be getting closer and closer back to the back of Sven's, and just giving his fellow countryman a little bit of a push along the straight here. I think he's trying to cure the fact that the GTR has had a little bit of a straight line speed reduction by giving some of his straight line speed over to the GTR. But also, I think that Cobra is due for a pit stop by the end of this lap, so he doesn't really want to have to fight his way past Sven's if he can help it, especially more so that he's on that hard tyre. But coming back to the point, our drivers up front are probably going to try and extend their soft stints as long as possible to pull out as big a gap as possible, whereas our drivers in the mid to rear field are going to get those mandatory stops out of the way, so that way then they can go to the soft and literally chase after the positions. And it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out in, because we'll have a couple of drivers up front who eventually have to take particular pit stops, whereas everybody else will be simply now sticking to their main strategy. As we can see, Jaeger going very deep in the Mulsanne and just about keeping it on track, but I think Jaeger there made a bit of a critical error on those on those soft tyres. And Nanika is capitalising it rapidly, and I think we're going to see a move from Nanika, do you reckon, here going into Indianapolis?
It will definitely, or maybe be smart and just stay back.
He's coming up towards the corner there. He's not going to go for it. He's actually going to hold back here. I think Nanika is going to be trying to pounce in the very near future, because he's got the soft tyre, much like Jaeger has, but Jaeger just seems to be struggling a little bit on this lap, and the Mercedes is getting closer and closer and breathing down the American machinery. And then again, Jaeger has had a very good run out of Arnage, and in fact, I think he's almost pulled himself into the slipstream zone with Karma. So go ahead. And I think we've just seen that the fastest lap has been set as a 3:53.3 by Medi so far. So Medi getting the leg on here, getting his legs out and trying to push on with the race pace, as our race leaders are coming across the line to start their 7th lap. And I think there will be a little bit of trading of that fastest lap as we go deeper and deeper into the race. As we can see, our battle for P8, and Karma picks up a half-second penalty for cutting one of the track limits going through the Porsche or the Chevrolet curves there. And that's going to be frustrating for Karma, who comes into the pits, as does our Cobra 45 and Francois Light. So they're coming off of their hard tyres, and they'll be going to soft surely at this point, and they'll be going to the end now in terms of just soft tyres all the way to the end. And as Jaeger comes down to commence on lap number 7, you can see that he's doing a good job of holding Nanika off. I think Nanika hasn't quite got the pace to overhaul the Chevrolet driver, unless the Chevrolet driver makes a major mistake. But he's doing a very good job at the moment, keeping Jaeger honest and keeping the pressure on. And, well, anything could happen, as we can see that in the rear view camera shot there, just as we're going through, the Chevrolet driver of Paraloco coming down towards the turns 4, 5 and 6 before Tetra Rouge, and doing a very good job just making his way casually up the field as we look further up towards the front now, and we keep an eye on some of our other drivers here. Today we're going to take a flick over to, I think, Plux Dark and see what's happening with the Aston Martin driver. And I've just been informed, ladies and gentlemen, that in terms of the strategies at the moment, as we look at Dawson and also Plux Dark here, because of the fact that they've decided to run only one of those mandatory tyres thus far, what you can imagine effectively is that they will have to do their mandated pit stops, but it's probably going to be a much later on that they do that second mandatory pit stop. But really right now, Dawson and Plux find themselves in a bit of a quiet space alone. and not really getting too much in the action. But at the same time, this is a good place because they can just focus on, for say, the next half an hour in particular, on just getting the laps in, getting that pace in, and setting personal bests, which Dawson definitely is on a personal best right now, coming out of the second of moles and chicanes. Whereas Pluck's 4 attempts down on his personal best thus far, but he has got some tyre wear to factor in, and he'll continue to work on it. And Savent's behind, who's now starting to set his own personal best here in the GTR, 9.4 seconds down on Pluck's the Duck. And you can see from Savent's perspective, it's a quiet situation where he's just got to focus on delivering lap after lap. And now, as they're coming down into the Mulsanne corners, we switch over to Jaeger here. From Jaeger's perspective, again, he's got a bit more of a pressure situation because he doesn't have that huge comfort space, as he's actually starting to move on to a much faster set of laps here, Jaeger. I think he's really starting to pull the lead out and get a move on. And you can see Nanika is actually falling back quite a bit as they're coming down the Gulf Straight through the first kink at this point. And whilst the Chevrolet, as we did hear from Grady earlier, mentioned that it is very strong down the straights in particular, the Mercedes is no slouch. But I think Jaeger has tried to clear the air in terms of the mistake he made earlier and is now really focusing on delivering those lap times, because our drivers are moving towards 353s when they hit a very good lap, and it's 355s when they are on more of a banking lap in terms of just saving a bit of fuel and taking it easy. And Nika coming out of Arnage and currently in P7 and trying to make his way forward. But keep in mind, of course, we do have Veroloco behind him, 2.1 seconds. I think Veroloco at this point isn't charging too hard. I think he's more focused on just simply keeping the guys ahead of him. And we jump over to Ramucho, who's down in P9 at the moment, found himself up towards the front initially. Of course, after the pit stops, he's dropped a bit back. And I must apologise, ladies and gentlemen, if you're wondering where my co-commentator's gone, he's just had to step out very briefly, but he'll be back in a short while. So you just got me for the time being, if you're wondering what's going on. As Dawson pits, so Dawson pits from P3. Of course, Ramucho at the moment is running around through the bush curves, but Dawson and Pluck's pitting at the same time here. And I think these two drivers have probably synchronised their strategies in terms of working together in monitoring one another. But this means they will drop quite a bit down, and that promotes Savent up into P3, who's just set a personal best of 355.8. So good job by Savent there, going around and doing a very good job out on the circuit. Behind him, you've got Jaeger, who is gradually creeping closer and ever closer. But the thing about Jaeger is, of course, is we've seen that once he makes one minor mistake or gets a little bit of a push on here, it may end up being that he drops down. But already he has pulled, I say that he has pulled 5 tenths out of Savent just through sector 1, 6 tenths now, and that gap is coming down very rapidly. But then again, he has picked up a penalty. You can see that in the rear view camera shot. Picked up a 1.5 second penalty, and that will definitely be for track limits at turn 3. As we also got Nanika picking up a huge penalty. Is that 2.5 seconds? I see on Nanika's car behind him. 2.5 seconds, and this is for track limits. The track limits at Circuit de la Sarthe are absolutely punishing, and both of these guys will know that this is crippling to their race aspirations. And what it will effectively mean is now that the Chilean of Veroloco is just going to jump up into P5, and he may get a 2-for-1 special down the Mulsanne straight here, because he'll know that Jaeger will have that penalty to burn, and Nanika's going to fall out of that slipstream zone of the Chevrolet, and he's now got it all to do once again. And one other thing that I should point out to you, ladies and gentlemen, is one of the problems with burning a penalty, particularly on a straight, is that you have to decelerate the car or retard the car, and then you have to build up the speed once again, and that is fuel that you have to consume on top of your standard fuel that you'll use around the lap. And knowing these drivers, in terms of their preparations, we see Dawson has come out just ahead of Ramucho here. He's positioned himself. That's worked out quite nicely for Dawson in terms of where he's come out of the pits. In that, by coming out in P7, he has a slipstream partner if he needs to. But Ramucho just chasing on the back of him right now. You can see Ramucho is giving him a little bit of a push along here. And I think what Ramucho's probably thinking right now is he knows Dawson will be very strong down these straights, simply because the Aston Martin has got the legs over the Citroen. And there's no point trying to get past him here. Doing it in the corners, yes, if you have to, but doing it down the straights wouldn't work out for the pair of them. It would be a time waste exercise. As we jump to the on top camera of the Citroen, and you can see the Citroen driver here is going to upshift nice and early, putting at about 7,800 RPM compared to 9,200 RPM, which is where you hit the rev limiter in this car. And he's eventually going to bump into the back of Dawson, who gives him a little flash of the hazard lights there, probably to say thank you for not passing me, as Dawson goes a bit deep, probably feeling a bit of the momentum of that love tap from behind. but it means that Ramucho is going to continue to push Dawson along here, and Dawson just simply needs to provide a tow cable for Ramucho as they're coming down the straights. And of course, as they continue to do this, this will enable the pair of drivers, well, you would hope that the pair of drivers can get closer and closer to the guys ahead of them by simply exercising this strategy. But of course, in Ramucho's perspective, if he feels that Dawson is holding him up too much, i.e. compromising him from being on his target pace right now, which doesn't look like he is, then what Ramucho may start to do is, particularly as we come into the second half of the lap, he will go for a move and sort of get the message through to Dawson to say, look, if you're going to pass me next time and get back in front, then I expect you to be faster this time because you are holding me up. But of course, Dawson will be aware of that, and Dawson will be in a middle ground mentally in terms of, do I push really hard when I've got the driver behind me who's putting some pressure on? And keep in mind, Plux, who pitted at the same time as Dawson, only a couple of seconds down the road, now finds himself 5.5 seconds down on Dawson running in P9, and behind Plux, you've got Hakone. So two Citroen drivers find themselves coming out behind two Aston Martin drivers after that round of pit stops there. And I think our Citroen drivers here will be salivating a little bit because they have a very fast car that can pull them along those straight lines. Again, it's not to take the Mickey out of the Citroen. The Citroen is very fast in the acceleration zones, and it's a very different car. It's all about the handling with that mid-engine rear-wheel drive compared to the front-engine rear-wheel drive of the Aston Martin. You can see Hakone is all over the back of Plux because of his handling advantage through the Chevrolet curves there, and as they're coming up into the Ford chicane, this will only be expedited even further. But Plux will know that unless Hakone goes for an absolutely miserable lunge into the chicanes, he's not going to go for the move there, and he just simply needs to keep nailing each and every lap. As we switch to the onboard, and you can see riding on board right now in the cockpit of that Citroen. I can tell you folks, having driven in the cockpit of one of these myself, it is not a comfortable experience to drive on one of these, and really Hakone is going to have to work very hard, assuming he's driving from the cockpit view, in order to stay behind Plux the Duck. But he's doing a fantastic job so far, and you can see both drivers very conscious of those track limits. And then by saying that, and Plux has picked up a half-second penalty, and that will be for cutting the apex curve of turn number 3 there. You're guaranteed to pick up a half-second penalty if you put all four wheels beyond the white line. As soon as you go beyond that line, you're going to get that half-second penalty, and that is a nightmare for your aspirations in terms of the race. Now, and behind them, you can see that Francois Light here is running in 12th at the moment. Francois had a bit of a disastrous turn earlier on in the fact that he picked up some nasty penalties, but he's still making his way around on the circuit, and don't count him out in terms of the aspirations to the top 10 or potentially the top 5 here. Remember, the Dodge is the fastest car on these straights without slipstream. It will build up to the highest top end speed here, going through the speed trap, and we're going to get an idea as he's coming down towards the first of the Mulsanne chicanes. This is when we'll know the speed trap figures. We're going to see that Francois comes up to the speed trap with a speed of 284 kilometers an hour. Now, whilst that is the European measurement, in terms of miles an hour, that is approximately in the region of about 168 miles an hour, if my calculations and bad maths are accurate. And right at the back of this chasing pack at the moment is Karma 69, and you can see he's chasing after Cobra at the moment. But again, Cobra, being in the Dodge, will do very well down the straights, and it's all for Karma to decide. Does he go all in to get past the Dodge driver, or does he actually just sit behind and say, you know what, I'll use the Dodge to pull me along and I'll try and get the move done when I come into the handling section, because we suspect that Mercedes is a strong handling car. Now, one of the things as well about the Mercedes is it's very stable on curves. So on exit curves, what you'll find is that Karma can really abuse the curves by comparison with some of the other curves that it's racing around on here. And particularly the Dodge driver, the Dodge is quite stable on the curves as well, but it can get just a little bit scary with tyre wear, whereas the Mercedes, literally, you put your foot down on a curve here, as long as you've straightened the steering wheel by about 75%, you can absolutely let it rip. And Karma is getting closer and closer to the back of Cobra right now. He's not going for the move here, and I think he's trying to get a message through to Cobra, which is, look, I'm right behind you, I'm fast behind you, you either need to get on with it, alternatively, I'm going to go for a move in the near future. And we can see that the fastest lap now has come down to a 3:52.4 for Medi 59. Medi currently leading this race. He's regained the lead after a little bit, and I think there has been a pass for the lead out on circuit between Medi and Kimi, where Kimi is now half a second down. Both Aston Martin drivers here running very close to one another, and I think really, whilst there may have been a pass, whether it was in the pits or out on track, I think these two guys are really using one another as pace cars. Now, what do I mean by that? What you can imagine is in a 2-hour endurance event, you may have in your mind, okay, every lap I do on a particular stint needs to be starting off in the mid 353s, and we see a 353.4. by Kimi, for example, here, the driver will say, right, I need to target these laps, but sometimes you might forget what your target pace is, particularly if you're racing against other drivers and you find yourself behind a driver. So what you know is that the driver ahead of you, as Mehdi goes a little bit wide of an exit there of turn number 3, but I think he'll be okay. I don't think he's going to pick up a penalty for that. But you'll look to the driver ahead and you think, actually, the driver ahead of me is running at a similar pace to me right now. I'll just use them as my reference markers. So what I'd expect from Kimi here is that he's not going to try and affect a pass on Mehdi, or if it is, it'll purely be on the straights where slipstream comes in. But Mehdi will be used by Kimi as his marker to say, right, so long as I stay within the slipstream of Mehdi, I'm having a fantastic race and I'm in that fight for the race win at the end of it. And of course, these two drivers right now, working in this fashion, will just gradually pull more and more distance over the rest of the field. But remember, these guys have not taken their medium or their hard stop, the mandatory stops, which will cost them, we reckon, at least 24 seconds of time combined. It could be as high as 30 seconds, depending on their pit entries and their exits as well, and whether they take on any fuel. It could be incredibly high. And one surprise driver here, remembering he started all the way at the back of the grid, ladies and gentlemen, is Peroloco, who has made his way up into P3 now. Of course, he is due for another pit stop in the very near future. That fuel tank sitting on approximately what looks to be about 18% fuel at the moment. So he's probably got enough fuel for this lap, but not for another lap. And those soft tyres are coming to the end of their shelf life here. You can see the Peroloco doing a very good job of around the right. And as they're coming down into what is the first of the Mulsanne chicanes, you've got a little bit further back Nanika right now in the Mercedes, doing a very good job here of just simply putting the laps after some scary moments earlier on and some penalties which you probably not wish you had. But Nanika running a good pace and starting to press upwards, and Dawson now getting closer and closer. And remember, Dawson had Ramuccio behind him, but you can see now how Dawson has pulled away from Ramuccio, and this is the indicator of Ramuccio being on a different strategy and was using Dawson to essentially pull him along as long as possible. But in the end, because Dawson is on those fresher tyres by comparison to the Citroen driver, he is pulling away, and he's doing the majority of it out of Tetrage onto the straights here. And Dawson in contention definitely for a top 3 spot here in terms of this race as it currently stands. Of course, we've got a long way to go. We've only passed the 38-minute mark here of this 2-hour endurance race, and he's pushing down 50% fuel in the tank at the moment. I think Dawson will feel very happy with where things currently stand. He's in a nice situation. He can see the guys up front who he's racing with in terms of out on the circuit. He will know the time gap to the race leaders and the guys behind him. He's got Ramuccio not putting huge pressure on right now. I think Dawson can just feel comfortable in where he's positioned. Behind him, of course, Ramuccio probably going to the end of the stint in the very near future, but the Citroen driver doing a very good job as we continue to follow the Aston Martin round. And well, as we switch over to Ramuccio, then what you can see from Ramuccio's perspective, as we actually jump further back here, you can see Jaeger having come onto an outlap into the Jaeger pit. Jaeger chasing after Savent, and as we come on towards Indianapolis, getting closer and closer to back of the GTR driver. I don't think he'll be affected in the pass here. I think particularly as this is an outlap, he will not want to burn in those tyres too heavily, and instead he'll just want to focus on delivering in terms of lap time on this opening one. Make sure the tyres are in that comfortable pace, and then go full attack on the next lap if he's going to do it. Jaeger gets a little bit sideways coming out of Indianapolis there, just ran a little bit wide on the curb, and the rear end of the car lit up. But the Corvette is quite a stable car, although I say that the Jaeger skids a little bit sideways. And well, he's doing a good job at the moment as our race leaders come into the pits. And look how much fuel Kimi has got over Mehdi after this stint. He's got 8 litres of fuel over Mehdi on those statistics charts on the left-hand side of your screen. And that will factor in terms of pit stop time. And I think we could see Mehdi actually come back out in front. As we know, Peroloco is also going to be coming into the pits at the end of this lap. He's very low on fuel right now. Now, Peroloco coming out of the Chevrolet curves, and Nanika just behind him. And we can see that Kimi and Mehdi have both gone for the medium here. So they've put in enough fuel to do at least one lap, and then they're going on to that medium. Peroloco pitting with 0% fuel remaining, so literally running that car to the dregs, and Nanika only 1% remaining. So we are going to have Dawson come out around the corners here, remembering Dawson being on an offset strategy. So he is going to pick up P3 at this point in the race. It's Ramuccio, Savent's coming off the hard tyre, and Jaeger coming off the hard tyre as well. So they did their mandatory stop there. And well, the only drivers then who have not done a mandatory stop as it currently stands, any one of their mandatory stops, would be Kimi and Mehdi. And Dawson here, I think he's put himself in a very strong position right now, because what he'll find as he almost gets it a bit wrong there coming out of the Dunlop chicane is that he is in a clear space on track, and it means now he can manage this car and just simply manage his pace. And he may not be racing for the win currently as it stands, but he'll feel confident so long as he doesn't make any mistakes as he sets a personal best out of Sector 1, that he will be in a very good position as he goes deeper and deeper in, because he won't have to worry about potential traffic or anyone coming up fast behind him. Of course, the drivers behind him, when they go onto fresh soft, will be faster naturally because he's got tyre in the car. And it's the same for Plux here. Plux, 10.8 seconds down on Dawson. I think Dawson has broken a bit away from Plux, but Plux, 9.1 seconds ahead of Francois Light. And what this means is for Plux as well, he can just focus on running in clear air. The only more optimal situation would be is if he had a car in front of him that was slightly faster in terms of the driver was slightly faster on one lap pace, but Plux would be able to use that driver's slipstream down the Mulsanne to give him a bit of a speed boost. But I think, again, with the fact that he's in an Aston Martin, it means that he's going to have that straight line speed that he's not going to have to worry too much. But we can see looking further down the Mulsanne, Francois Light running around in the Dodge at the moment. Being quite happy with his position, but I think Francois is quite out of sequence for everyone else, because we've got Peroloca, who came out of the pit only just recently, having gone up into P3, come out in P6, but I believe that was putting a limited amount of fuel. I know, my apologies, actually, he's putting almost a full fuel tank, and he's going to set us off. So Peroloca is on a charge right now, and has effectively jumped a huge swath of the grid by simply running on a very different strategy and a very quiet strategy by comparison to everyone else. But we've got a huge slipstream train now forming with everybody coming out, and Karma69 finding himself on a 1 second penalty. Well, this is not working out for Karma, and it's not working out for any of the Mercedes drivers here. The Mercedes drivers seem to be very prone for picking up penalties here, and you can see Karma going a bit wide out the exit of the apex of the second Mulsanne chicane, and I'm wondering if that's going to compound this penalty. Doesn't look like he's going to get any compound interest on that penalty, and Cobra right now trying to get himself in the attacking position in that Dodge Viper as we switch to the onboard with the driver here. Lovely forward view, but he has got quite that quite chunky bumper which he's got to look over, as we can see. Coming up into the Mulsanne corner then for the 11th time of asking, hooks it very nice in the apex, and note there how he downshifted to second gear as he turned the car through the apex. Now you're probably wondering, why is that important? What he's doing there is he's approaching the braking zone with less downshifts. He's trying to save the tyres for as long as possible, and he used that downshift to second on apex to help rotate the rear of the car, because when you do a downshift on the car, you trigger what is known as a bit of engine braking, which is where essentially you're forcing the car through doing the downshift to drop some speed, particularly if you downshift right when your car is beyond second gear and in third gear in terms of speed. And coming up into Indianapolis, it's down in third gear at the moment, trailing into the corner as Karma increases its penalty to 2 seconds for cutting the Indianapolis entry curb there, and now coming for Arnage, and you can see that it's going from bad to worse for the Frenchman ahead of Cobra. But this means for Cobra now, what he has got is access to a slipstream train ahead of him, and you can see that Karma is actually struggling for a bit of pace as our race leaders come into the pit to shirk off their medium tyres and switch probably over to the hard alternatively to switch to a set of softs. But what that will mean is, as Dawson is coming through the Chevrolet curves and now up into the Ford chicane, Dawson will be eyeing this up as he comes into the pits himself here, and I think he'll find himself dropping back into the battles further down as he nails that pit entry, very fast pit entry, and our race leaders switch to a set of hards, both of them, and Plux will Plux be pitting as well. I think he's synchronised to Dawson in terms of strategy, but Kimi and Mehdi are running together right now. You can see Kimi staying right behind Mehdi, and this is what I was saying about earlier. These two drivers are working together. I think Kimi recognises at this point in the race, Mehdi is the faster driver, but in return, if he's matching his pace to Mehdi just about and staying in the slipstream zone, it's giving him a huge amount of comfort, and it means he'll get stronger in the later part of the race, because so long as he stays in the slipstream, he can upshift a lot earlier than Mehdi, who has to do the hard work. He's got nobody to give him the tow cable along the straight, and that is reflecting the fact that Kimi is upshifting on that rev bar there. He did the upshift to 5th, coming out of turn 6 before Tech Charouge, well before he hit, well, just as he hit the halfway line, and well, Mehdi, by comparison, will be having to do that upshift significantly earlier. But of course, they're both running for Aston Martin, so you can imagine that both drivers here are working together to an extent. They both want to represent that manufacturer and do very well for them. And, well, getting closer and closer, but I don't think he's going to be going for a pass. I think he's just going to be sitting back and holding on for the time being. As they come through the first chicane then, and we ride on board with our drivers, you can see upshifting just a little bit before he hits the rev limiter there, and just simply settling into that overall thought process of, I'm not going to fight you, Mehdi, I'm just going to sit behind you, I'm not going to put any pressure on this. Bringing him in a little bit of a bump draftage. Oh no, he's lifted out a bit. In fact, he's not even going to go for the bump draft here. which is what you'd expect really of real-world racing, because unless it's NASCAR with those very gentle little bumps, you can't really do that, because by the end of the race you'd have no front bumper left if you bump drafted up to the umpteenth heaven. But coming out of the second chicane, it's all working out for these two at the moment, and Dawson has found himself coming back out in P3. We should point out, folks, that Dawson, after that pit stop where he's put on the hard, so this is Dawson's second mandatory stop right now. He's getting this done. The problem for Dawson, however, is the fact that now he's done his second mandatory and the guys up front have done their second mandatory. What it means is that gap of 23 seconds between Dawson and Medi really is an indicator of the gap between Dawson and our race leaders. So that is the gap our first and second place drivers have over the rest of the field. It's 23 seconds plus, because of the fact that they've been running such a clever strategy here. Although, then again, I say that, look at Paraloco, who is on a very, very different setup, and Francois Light behind him, chasing after the Chevrolet driver in the Dodge. The problem for Francois is he's going to come to the end of his fuel tank very shortly. He's running on those softs at the moment, which are coming to the end of life as well. But Paraloco here is just getting faster and faster and more menacing as we go deeper and deeper into the race. I think Francois is trying to stay with Paraloco for as long as possible, just in order to get the pace here. I think Paraloco has turned up the wick and has decided right now that now is the time to strike, because he's been able to get past everybody in the battle for P5 by simply going on to a different strategy. But now he's got to put in the hard work to keep those positions when the pit stops come around. But of course, his pit stop, his next scheduled pit stop, is going to be much later compared to the pit stops around him. We're just taking the tick off on our chart here, and really, that's the majority of our drivers, from what I understand, have taken their mandatory stop. So it's opening up, and you can see the Paraloco is set his personal best at the moment. His target time seems to be in the region of 3:54 as Francois coming out of our large deck, getting it hooked up really nicely, but just falling out of that slipstream zone of the Chevrolet in front of it. I think that was actually going to happen, and Bucks here now starting to form a little bit of a conga line with regards to the Dodge behind him, and also Nenita in the Mercedes, the Dodge in the middle of them being Cobra. So Cobra here finding himself in a little bit of a sandwich. I don't think Cobra feels very comfortable with this situation right now, because he's coming to the end of the stint, so he can't really afford to affect the pass as the two Frenchmen leading, so Medi and Kimi both coming to the pits. But as we stay with Bucks, Cobra and Nanika, it's getting closer and closer, and you can see the problem is that Cobra cannot get past Bucks because he knows he's got to pit. It wouldn't be worthwhile, it's going to cost him time. But Nanika is getting frustrated here and getting closer and closer to the back of the two drivers ahead of him, and he'll be hoping, of course, they pit as Nanika picks up a half-second penalty. Now, where he picked that up, I'm not sure, but Nanika will be aggravated by that. As we see Bucks coming in, Cobra coming in, so they're both going to throw off their, what I believe are their hard tyres here, and that releases Nanika, but not without a rather punishing half-second penalty, as both Bucks and Cobra switch off their current tyres. Now, Paraloco coming out, and look at this. Paraloco only 1 second of our race leaders and finding himself right within the slipstream zone of Medi. Now, this is a surprise, and of course, Medi and Kimi have both taken fuel because they've also gone to a new set of softs. So they've gone for a full fuel tank, and Paraloco here really gaining so much ground right now. And I think here, Fabio Patina is going to be putting his foot down, because he thinks to himself, if he can get within the slipstream of these two Aston Martins, even if it's just for this lap, he will gain so much time by being in that double turbo in front. I think the Aston Martin guys have just done that, and you can see he's picked up a 1.5 second penalty just for cutting it too much of the entry into Teteruch, and that is a disaster for the Chilean, and the fact that now he's going to lose the opportunity of a lifetime in this race to essentially attach himself to the rear of our race leaders, and he'll have to burn that off gradually and find himself dropping a little bit back. As you can see, because Medi is running in that slipstream of Kimi, he is gaining 3 tenths by the end of the Mulsanne straight part 1 here, and meanwhile Paraloco is falling back. That is very unfortunate for the Chilean, but that strategy has paid off, and I think he is really on course right now to be contesting the top 5 here. As you can see also, in terms of his fuel, 50% fuel, he's got a long way to go on the stint. As we switch over to another Chevrolet driver of Jaeger, so we go a little bit further back to Jaeger in P6 right now. See, he's running a good stint as well, and Remuto just ahead of him in the Citroen. These guys are all keeping one another honest, and they're all just a little bit outside of one another's slipstream zone, because you've got Nanika at the head of this battle for P4, sitting on 1.3 seconds. Well, they're all 1.3 seconds ahead of one another, and I think at this point they're all sizing one another out and not wanting to push too hard. It's a case of who comes first here, because what you can imagine, particularly in Remucho's case, for Remucho to get closer to Nanika and to pull away from Jaeger, he's got to put in a lot more effort in terms of using the fuel up in the car and of using the tyres. Although the Citroen is a very good car for fuel and tyre management, he will have to work it hard because he doesn't have the straight line speed of the other two cars around him. But in return, of course, if he does that, then it means he may compromise his strategy to an extent. He may push himself into a mistake. And you can see, in terms of those time screens right now, Jaeger is closing up because of the straight line speed advantage of the Chevrolet. And the Nika is not being reeled in quick enough for Ramucho to be able to use the Nika as a slipstreaming tool. And meanwhile, Jaeger is now definitely in that slipstream zone, as that gap has now closed down to under 8 tenths a second, and Jaeger is building and building. And you'll see this now, if you look at that kilometers an hour bar at the bottom center of your screen, you'll see he's going to build so much speed. That supercharger has been activated within the 6th gear. He's heading up towards 7,000 RPM right now, if not in excess of it, and that V8 is just coming to life, whereas Ramucho losing out a bit because of this. And whilst Jaeger has not gained too much doubt, I think he's also been sizing up with a very early upshift down the straight. On the Gulf Straight, he will be saving a good amount of fuel here. I think Jaeger will be just trying to inch himself closer and closer, and as soon as he sees Ramucho start to fall about 2 to 2.5 seconds back, oh sorry, not Ramucho, as soon as he starts to see, that is Ramucho, my apologies, when he starts to see Ramucho fall about 2 seconds back off of the Nika ahead of him, he'll go for the move, because then he'll know that Ramucho is now costing him time. He's not going to keep pulling him along for much longer, and when he does start to pull him along, it's only a benefit on the straights, it's not a benefit through the corners. And already you can see the Nika is pulling away from Ramucho right now, so I suspect a move from Jaeger is going to be coming out in the near future, as Jaeger gets it a little bit wrong initially, and into the wall goes Ramucho, grazing the wall there out the Porsche curves, and that's going to cost him about a tenth, but Jaeger is not in a prime position to strike here. So I don't think Jaeger's going to be able to capitalise on that, and I think he's actually struggling through the Porsche Chevrolet curves there by comparison to the Citroen, and he's lost in the course of that sequence 4 tenths a second where we'd expect him to catch up, and I think Jaeger just does not have the car that does too well through there by comparison with the Citroen. And of course that'd be expected because of the Chevrolet's characteristics, which are its advantage car, it's a very strong car down the straight. As we go a bit further back, and we're going to take a look at Francois Light, who's all the way down in 11th at the moment, running in the Dodge Viper. Having recently taken a pit stop as well, so he's a bit out of sync at the moment on his outlap on his soft tyres. But Francois doing a relatively good job, and Pluck's all the way down in 13th, and Cobra after his pit stop down in 14th. And this is a bit unfortunate for the British driver and the Frenchman right at the back here, because they were doing very well, and I think after the sequence of pit stops, getting the mandatory hard stop out of the way as well as the medium stop at the start, they find themselves in a bit of a problem as Karma has had to burn a penalty, and I think that's for cutting the curb somewhere around the Ford chicanes there. But what it means now is Karma is going to be out of sequence for these two guys, and he's going to be behind two drivers on very fresh tyres and with full tanks of fuel, which means that both Cobra and Plux here can simply will run away from Karma. If Karma gets close to him, he's going to have to rip a huge amount of life out of his tyres, and his fuel tanks are closed up. This is not where Karma wants to find himself. He's right at the back now and out of position in terms of his strategy. So Karma is going to be struggling for a bit as we ride on board with Cobra here, going through Tech Rouge, and you can see line out very nicely, but a little bit hesitant to get on the power there through the apex curve. And I think that's because of the number of penalties that have been accrued through Tech Rouge. Tech Rouge probably being the second dangerous corner for penalties at the Sarthe, the most dangerous one in my personal opinion being the Dunlop chicane, just simply because of that you want to exploit those curves but you can't. You get penalties every time you try to exploit them. But now coming down into the first of the Mulsanne chicanes here, you can see that Cobra is not closing up enough here, and I think again he doesn't want to close up too rapidly. And you can see just how little brake force he was applying there on braking into the first chicane. He was only applying 50% brake force, and it was from very far back. Now what that tells you is that he is trying to save these soft tyres and make them go really long in this race. He is not taking life out of these tyres. And will it pay off? That's a big question. Personally, I think it will pay off so long as he can stay behind Plux. And we know Plux as well, and I know Plux from personal experience is a very, very intelligent driver when it comes to car management. So I think Cobra's deciding whatever Plux is doing in terms of saving the car or managing the car, Cobra's going to try and replicate it. And that's not to say Cobra can't manage a car at all. It's just that by mirroring what Plux is doing ahead of him, he has his own pace car. And that's one of the things with these endurance races is that it's not all about being the fastest driver over half an hour, it's also about being the most consistent driver over the 2 hours or whatever the length of the race is, simply because you can be the fastest driver for half an hour but then you can simply bin it after half an hour and it's all over. For Cobra right now, holding on to the back of Plux and just inching ever closer under the slipstream as they come around through at the Mulsanne corner for the 14th time. And we take a little bit further up the field and we come back to one Nanika, who's sitting in full place at the moment. In fact, my apologies, we're looking at Peroloco, and the Chilean at the moment doing a very good job of setter. He has dropped back a bit though from our guys who are race leaders, so he's dropped back from Kimi. Now the gap is 4.3 seconds. And in his position right now, this is quite a comfortable no man's ground for him. The fact that he doesn't need to push too hard because he knows the race leaders are in a different race at this point in time. Of course, if they start fighting, then they'll bring their race towards Peroloco's race. But if he can keep putting these good laps, looking at that gap to Nanika of 8.3 seconds, and the fact that everybody is so spread out on circuit, if it's 8.3 seconds to the start of the Chevrolet curves right now, then you can imagine that when Peroloco goes for a pit stop that's going to cost him somewhere in the region of 15 to 20 seconds, he'll find himself coming out probably about P7, which is a huge jump in terms of positional order out on circuit. Nanika, meanwhile, being a bit closer to the battle for P5, Ramuccio only 1.6 seconds behind and ever closing through this section of the circuit, while the Citroen being the dominant car through the second half of the track. Nanika is putting in a good time at the moment, but mate will probably be regretting some of the penalties he has picked up and some of the small mistakes that have materialised because he could be further upfield right now. But again, it's all to play for as Ramuccio comes to begin lap 15, with Jaeger getting ever closer to him. And Jaeger hasn't gone for the move here, it's worth pointing out, ladies and gentlemen. So I think Jaeger feels Ramuccio is doing everything he needs to, but Jaeger is getting closer and closer to the back of that section. I think the Chevrolet driver will be sized up a move here as Ramuccio does get it a little wrong on exit of turn 3. But then again, this could all be part of Jaeger's plan to simply put pressure on the Citroen driver ahead of him rather than trying to affect the move, because of course once he's ahead of Ramuccio, if he can't break the Citroen distance to Ramuccio once being ahead, then he will be pulling the Citroen driver along and giving them an advantage. So it's a very tactical one in terms of how our drivers are going to play this one out. As they come down onto Mulsanne straight once again, then we see Jaeger doing some very early upshifts there, and the gap has opened up to 6/10. It will start coming down very gradually, but I think he is literally using Ramuccio as every potential opportunity to save fuel. As we can see, speaking of burning things, Nanika takes another half-second penalty. I'm not sure why he's picked that up. That half-second penalty looks as though it's for very briefly running wide at Tetrarood, but it means he's got a half-second penalty he's going to have to burn, and that will drop him definitely right back into the clutches of these two guys who are watching, who are battling for P5 right now. You can see a very early upshift from Jaeger there, and you want to upshift early in the Corvette because of its supercharger. All the power comes in the lower RPM range, and then if you upshift later on in the RPM, you are burning so much fuel it's not worth your time. As they come down up towards the second chicane here, we ride on board with the Chevrolet driver, feeling very comfortable at the moment. I think he's just settling into this race, and you can see they're coming down into the chicane, how he's lifted and just done some very gradual braking to begin with, and he's trying to stop all the momentum being loaded onto the front tyres too rapidly. And of course, all of our drivers will be running brake biases on their car, which will suit their way of driving, but also try and spread the tyre wear between the front and the rear. But you can see what Jaeger is trying to do is trying to slow down the rate at which the momentum transfer happens under braking in the Chevrolet, and that will help with the tyre wear, particularly with the front left tyre, which will feel a lot under braking going into these chicanes. Now coming down into the Mulsanne corner, that front left takes a huge amount of wear as well because it's a right-hand turn, so left-hand tyres take the majority of the wear. And again, it's a heavy braking zone. You're coming down from what is effectively in the region of about 160 miles an hour, or as we said earlier, about 270 kilometers an hour. And well, in return of that, what it means is you want to try and ease the pressure off that tyre. The Chevrolet driver doing everything right so far to keep himself in contention for a top 5 spot here, and just simply settling in as we're coming towards the end of the first hour of this race. And it's all going well for our drivers up front. Of course, our drivers up front having a very easy and good time of things, in the fact that Medic and Kimmy running after one another out on the circuit, but not really seeing too much action. Jaeger being the closest one in terms of trying to affect the battle, as we can see that Nanika is starting to burn that half-second penalty. Currently sitting in P4 and burning it under brake. I think he's going to try and burn the half-second penalty off by simply burning it into those brake. Perhaps doing a little lift and coast into a corner, which will cost him a small amount of time, but nowhere as much. As we see a move here, Jaeger is going to go for the move up into the Porsche curves. Then he's going to have the inside line, and Ramuccio immediately starts to back out of it. But now this is where Jaeger is going to come under a return fire from Ramuccio, because the Corvette is weak through here by comparison to Ramuccio. And as Ramuccio throws the car into the corners, then you can see he's all over the back of the Chevrolet, but he just cannot find a way past because it really is only one way through at this point. But Jaeger holding up Ramuccio, it could be argued, and he's going to be coming into the pits because he is coming to the end of his fuel tank, and I think those soft tyres have seen it all. As Peroloco coming through, Peroloco into the pits, Nanika into the pits as well, and Ramuccio. So all of our drivers here into the pits, get a watch back on what was a very good overtake by Jaeger here. He sized this up perfectly in terms of when to strike, and he went for it, and he hasn't cost himself or Ramucho too much time, but Ramucho will feel that he lost a bit of time there through the Porsche curves. So everybody coming into the pits now, bar Dawson, who's going to stay out on circuit in P3 and continue to make his way around. But in terms of who comes out of the pits ahead of everybody then, Peroloco will be the first to come out, as we can see that Dawson comes out in that P3. Francois Light coming through at the pits. The Peroloco will be the one who comes out in fourth place, and this is phenomenal stuff from the Chilean. Look at how he has just jumped up through the field in terms of the fact that he's now finding himself in P4. He's got clear air, he's got clear track ahead and behind, and it means he can just go to work once again. He doesn't have to worry about getting caught up in somebody else's battle. And with an hour to go now, what you can probably suspect is that he may look to start up in the tempo now, because he will know, right, I've cleared a huge number of drivers, let's avoid any penalties, and let's simply now corner after corner, lap after lap, and get after Dawson. And Dawson will be reacting to this, you can be sure of that, because what he'll know now is that Peroloco has made his way through the field through strategy, and he's now got a threat coming up behind him in terms of a fast car in the hands of a very fast and capable driver. But then again, Dawson is no slouch. We'll point out here, ladies and gentlemen, whilst Peroloco is very famous on the World Tour circuit at the moment in terms of Fabien Portier, you'll see him in the Nations Finals, etc. Dawson is a top split driver who has been in top 16 races in the past and part of Vanquish Esports, and now find himself part of TX3. Very fast drivers, the pair of them, and I think if they get close to another on track, you are going to see some absolute fireworks blow up in terms of who emerges victorious. I don't think it's going to be a simple case of the Chilean getting past. And behind them, Francois Light now up into that P5. Although keep in mind that Francois has not hit it as of yet, but Plux the Duck meanwhile battling here with Nanika as they come down towards the second chicane then, and it looks as though Plux is going for the move, and he's got it done under slipstream. The Aston Martin just having so much performance in that V12 engine, that 6-litre engine, in an absolute stonker down the straights, and the Nico right up Plux's backside here and getting very close to the rear of the British driver, the French, and just avoiding the contact there. And I think the Nico is trying to get a message through to Plux here, which is, okay, you've got the move done, now get a move on with it, because I've got a Jaeger fast behind me, and Jaeger, who burned off his penalty, he had a small penalty there, but he burns it by running close behind these guys coming out the second chicane. Well, Jaeger finds himself in a freeway fight, and he's going to pick up a double toe here, and surely the Corvette driver must be salivating at the prospect here that he could do some incredible fuel saving, or he can go for an absolute monster of an attack. Well, he gets it very long out of the Mulsanne corner there. I think he carried too much speed under braking, and that caught him out by surprise. Not too far back, but he's just holding on to the clutches. He's literally underneath at the moment. He will not be getting that double toe off the Plux as well, as Plux has been everything he can underneath behind him. And Nanika, to be fair as well, isn't putting on a huge amount of pressure, but you can see that he's getting closer and closer. And will he go for a turn move into Indianapolis? He's going to go into Indianapolis on the outside here. He's going to fly around the outside under braking. That is brave stuff from the Frenchman, and Plux does not have a response at this time. I think Plux is going to stay behind here as he flashes his lights at Nanika, and I'm wondering whether Plux is going to come back immediately. As we're riding on board on the replay camera right now, you could see Nanika just simply went for it round the outside, and Plux had to do a little dab of the brakes there before his standard braking zone, I think. And I think the reason why he might have flashed his lights to say, okay, well, you proved your point, you got back past me, now prove to me that you can come away. But he's not going to run, and Plux is now coming back at Nanika, and well, he's really going to go for it here up into the Porsche curves, and he's going to cost himself and Nanika a little bit of time. But Jaeger is not catching up as a result of this, and Jaeger in fact is sitting a bit far back, and I think he might be playing the strategic game here. Although from Jaeger's perspective, I would argue now you want to start thinking about getting past these guys if you feel you're faster, and Plux and Nanika need to settle this down, because they've got a long time to go, and if they continue to fight like this, then what this means is our top 5 will start to eke further and further away. And if they've got any pit stops lined up which will put them behind these guys, well, you may find that after the pit stop they actually come back out in front as we ride on board with Jaeger here, and look how close he's getting to the back of the Nika getting all out of sorts going through the 4 chicanes there. And now will Jaeger go for a move? Surely Jaeger has got to go for a move here. because he's so close to the back of the league. He's been the closest he's ever been. Will he do it up into Dunlop, going through turn one then? He sticks to the left-hand side initially, but then he backs out, and you can see he lifted off the throttle through turn one. And I think Jaeger just feels it's not the right time in the race to go for any moves there. I think he's trying to just simply save the car, because if he can do this now, then it may work out for him when it's come down to one of the 2 last pit stops, where you can imagine he might have some extra fuel in the tank and decides to come back into the fight right there and then. But behind then, as they're coming out of turn 8, we've got Ramucho, who's 3 seconds down, and he's catching up a little bit to this gathering of cars, but he's still a way off in terms of being able to get to the slipstream zone. He's got 3 seconds up ahead of Severance. We're just putting in some data into our own screens to talk about the strategy team. You can see Severance is coming up closer and closer at the moment. The GTR, of course, having that lackluster fifth gear, then opening up the slip gear, building up speed now. And the GTR driver's had a very quiet race. I don't think he's really seen too much. Going in the position, going was, remember, all the way up towards the front at the start of this one, but he finds himself in P11 right now and just sitting on the tail end and watching the action around him unfold, pardon me, as Cobra is getting closer and closer to the back of Patcone, and I think he's going to find himself in the slipstream zone soon, because the Citroen, we know, is not going to be strong on the straight here, and Cobra just simply needs to put his foot down. 10 behind, getting closer and closer very gradually, but not fast enough. And then we've got Karma in at P14 at the moment, who's very, very far off the back of everything. I think Karma has really lost out with everything that's happened here. He's had some unfortunate penalties and also some unfortunate incidents, and he's now 22.6 seconds off of P3 and finds himself 1.5 minutes down on our race leaders. Speaking of our race leaders, as we flick back up towards Kimi, they're still running around nose to tail. Eddie and Kimi up on lap number 17 and just coming out of our Arge, and now making their way down towards the Porsche curves. And you can see Kimi just simply using his teammate as a pace car here. He's not doing anything to try and make a move. I think he just simply used him to save fuel and stay behind him. You can see little lifts of the throttle here and there as well, all indicative of a driver who's planning something big in the final stages. He's not going for any moves at this point in time, as Mendy just clips the barrier there coming out of the Porsche curves. Very gentle graze, which won't cost him any time. He wouldn't have lost any momentum for a very gradual clip. Happens normally. But as they come out of the Chevrolet curves here, both drivers just nailing it to the full track limits and running around like this. And in terms of fastest laps, I think both drivers are going to be coming into the pits very shortly, as Kimi and Medi both pop in. Once again, it's almost as if it's synchronized pit stops here. And I think Dawson is also going to be on tune for a pit stop as well, as we can see Kimi coming into the pits once again with 7 litres more fuel than Medi, and that's all that fuel saving he's been putting in coming into effect. As Dawson right now 32 seconds down on our race leaders. I don't think he's going to be finding himself ahead of them anytime soon, because he's going to have to take a pit stop at the end of this lap. Surely he hasn't got the fuel to get himself to the end here. But Dawson running a very quiet race, as we can see the Paraloco using the full track limits there coming out of the Chevrolet curbs, and in his own Chevrolet doing a very good job of just expanding the gap with Transfer Light behind. As Dawson's into the pits and Paraloco now comes through the Ford chicanes and is not due for a pit stop for a little while. We've probably got at least 4 more laps of Paraloco going around on the circuit before he comes in for his pit stop. But Kimi comes out ahead of Medi. Now this is important here. Note that he has come out over 8 tenths ahead. He's 1 second ahead of Medi. Will he try to go for a big push here and pull away from his fellow countrymen, or will he let Medi catch up and do some fuel saving on the Molten straight and then get back into that 1-2 formation? Now personally, with 50 minutes to go, if Kimi decides to go for it right now, that is a very early attempt at a pull away. I think in Kimi's eyes, he knows that he is going to have to put in a huge amount of effort to pull away from Medi. So as a result, he will only want to do it when he feels as though he can sustain that effort for the whole duration of the race. And whilst that gap is sitting at a second right now, I think both drivers are looking not to abuse their cars too much because of the fuel situation. But Medi will want to think about, okay, let's see how this opening out lap goes. Do I close up naturally versus Kimi, or do I find that I need to be a bit more aggressive for certain corners and use a bit more fuel to close up to Kimi? Because he will use that information, and if he then notices that actually he's very gradually gaining on Kimi over the course of this lap, then he probably won't push any harder, because he'll think, okay, I'll naturally get into that slipstream zone. Alternatively, if he sees that that gap doesn't come down from that 1 second window, of which it's still sitting at 1 second right now, then what you can imagine will happen is that probably on the next lap or on their third lap within the stint, Medi will start to go full attack and get into that slipstream zone to save some fuel. Looking further back, we can see back to Jaeger in P5 as Nanika has picked up another 1.5 second penalty, or at least a 1 second penalty. I suspect, again, that's Tetra Rouge for you. Jaeger in P5 right now, midway through a stint, holding on to P5, although he's pressure starts running Mercedes behind. Mercedes driver not closing up enough here for him to affect the pass, and he's going to have to burn that penalty as well, which will be frustrating for him. And Jaeger doing a very good job of just simply holding on to P5. As I say that, the commentator's curse kicks in as he picks up a 1.5 second penalty, and that's purely for track limits at the second of the Moles and chicanes. He just simply cut over the white lines a little bit too much, and he's been awarded a 1.5 second penalty, and that means that he's going to fall into the clutches, and the two drivers will finish now stuck out of circuit together, having to burn their respective penalties as they come into braking for the Mulsanne corner. And Francois Light is now going to get a little bit of a free pass here. I think Jaeger is closing up on him naturally, but when he has to take that penalty, Francois is going to breathe a sigh of relief and think, well, actually, the Chevrolet and the Mercedes behind aren't catching because they have to burn. But of course, before that happens, Jaeger and Nanika do have a lap to serve those penalties, and I think they'll do everything they can to close up on the Dodge driver in front. As you can see, Nanika already looking to size up Jaeger here and getting closer and closer. Now, will he go for a move it, or he's just lifting off the throttle? And actually, he's using the fact he's so close to Jaeger here to burn his penalty. That is smart driving from the Mercedes driver. So he knows he can just lift through Indianapolis, by the entry into Indianapolis, and he doesn't have to worry about the penalty. And he's up massively on his personal best. You can see coming around, he's already turned off approximately 6/10 of that penalty, and Jaeger's still got 1.4 seconds of his penalty to go. So these drivers all sides of one another up in terms of tactical items here and where they can burn the penalty running behind one another. But Jaeger is getting closer to the back of the Dodge driver. And now, will he try and go for it? Will he try and effect move much like he did earlier in Ramucho as they're coming up into Portugal? And you can see he's all over the back of the Dodge. And I'm wondering if Francois Light here is struggling on his tyres because he's just not showing any pace on the entry into the Porsche. I mean, all of our drivers are fast here, but look how he seems to be struggling through the Chevrolet curves. Now, the right-hander into the left-hand, now they've got to do the flick, of course, to the left here, and Francois missing that apex curve massively, and there's contact, a little bit of contact between Jaeger and Francois flashing the lights, and he's into the pit, surely. He's got to be pitting here, as you can see that indeed Francois does come into the pit, and in return, Jaeger now goes around to complete another lap. Now, as they come through towards the next lap, then, so it's going to be Jaeger who's burning his penalty immediately, and this will release Nanika back up into P4. As he comes up into P4, then Ramucho, meanwhile, in P6, just seemingly struggling a little bit in terms of pace right now, and he's got Svens and Hakon battling with one another behind him. And Svens here holding on to P7 right now, but I can imagine that Hakon is getting closer and closer and breathing down the neck. It's breathing down the neck of the Frenchman, and it's only going to be a matter of time before he's able to effect a pass. Well, we'll have to wait and find out whether Hakon can do it here, because the GTR will be strong on the straights, but it's not as strong as it used to be. But he will pull away a little bit initially, and then Hakon's got all the work to do, and he has to use a lot of fuel if he wants to get past the GTR in front of him. And as he goes very wide there on Tetra Rouge, I think both drivers just got away with it there. They both ran all the way out to the limit. Sven's already flicking on the indicators there, as if to send a message to Hakon, as if to say, you know what, you can pass. You can get past me, and that in that instance may be the case that actually, you know what, the game is up and Hakon is going to get it done. But he's right up the back of the GTR, and I don't think he wants to make the pass here. In fact, I think he just wants to stay behind. I think he wants to use the GTR to pull him along on the straight. Whereas the GTR driver, of course, is of a very different mindset. As effectively saying, you know what, please pass the cone. I haven't got the pace anymore. More than one tyres. If you think you're faster, then please go through. So these two constantly, well, I think they're both misreading one another right now, and it's difficult because Hakon has got to make a choice here. Does he go for the move and finally clear him? Well, he's going to go for the move. I think, you know what, it's finally got to him. The GTR is slower than him, so he's going to go for it, and he's going to get it done, going into the chicane. And Svens now behind. Let's see if he has a comeback or whether alternatively he'll set down. As Svens gets very sideways there coming out of the second Mulsanne chicane, and that was near fatal in terms of him getting it planted on the throttle, but he just about managed to balance it out. I think Spencer doing a good job of getting back in the slipstream of Hakkone, but the return, of course, will be the fact that he's got a lot of work to do if he wants to get back past. And does he really want to get back past the driver as they're coming up into the Mulsanne corner once again? As they're going through the corner, you can see that Spence is all over the back of Hakkone initially, and Hakkone starts to accelerate away, and that's the Citroen's lower gears and its acceleration tuning working out for it. But then as we get up into that 5th and 6th gear, watch how the GTR gets closer and closer, particularly with the slipstream added on, and now Spence is all over the back of Hakkone, and it's just this constant back and forth. And I think really both of them are thinking to one another, oh, give it a break, lad, give it up. And Hakkone is getting a little bit of a push along here from Spence. I think Spence is trying to make it clear that he doesn't want to battle for this position, and they both need to get away from Dawson behind, who's very fast behind and is on a very different strategy. As you can see, that Spence goes a bit wide there, but not quite off, and Hakkone pretty much almost did the same up ahead of him. So both drivers also being a bit of tyre wear here, and they're getting there. But the problem is now that because they've spent this time sort of arguing over the position out on track, it means that they've lost time to the guys ahead of them. And look at Dawson, who's already picked off approximately a second through all this back and forth discussion out on the circuit, cars talking to one another. Hakkone now coming up into the Porsche curves, and you can see Spence again having to give Hakkone a little bit of a nudge. Hakkone just doesn't have that speed, but now watch as they go through this section. You can imagine Hakkone is just going to pull away. And you can see the gap at the line is 2.5 tenths, and Hakkone will be able to hit those apex curves much more comfortably out to 3.5 tenths. This is where the Citroen will work out, losing out a little bit here going into the final bit of the Chevrolet curve complex, and Peroloco is into the pits from P3, and he's got a lot of fuel in the tank, 34 litres in fact. And I'm wondering whether this is actually a pit stop to go on to one of the mandatory tyres, because now that much fuel remaining, that would indicate some sort of mandatory stop. As we can see, Jaeger is going to come through here, and I think Jaeger is actually going to come along and take over P3 as Peroloco comes out the pits. Now he's going to find himself right down in the mid of a bunch of cars here. This hasn't worked out too well for the Chilean, and he's put the hards on. So this is why also Peroloco's moved so far up the pack. He did not put on the hard tyre earlier on, and that would explain why he finds himself now coming out in amongst a bunch of drivers who have already done their mandatory stops. He's got Ramuccio behind him, and Ramuccio will feel aggrieved at this because he knows, he will recognise immediately that Peroloco is going to be on that hard time. You can see Ramuccio is already getting the move sized up, but of course now that he's coming out of Tetrouche, he's going to have to do it quickly, because as soon as they get up into 5th, 6th gear down here, of course Ramuccio has that 7th gear, the Chevrolet Supercharger just gives it so much straight line speed, and you can see, look at how the Citroen is falling back despite having the slipstream. He's not gaining enough now make the move, but now finally getting into that top gear, and he's deciding to bump drop instead of going for a move here, because I think he feels that he's not going to have that straight line speed, and Peroloco will just simply pass him on the next part of the straight. So it's tactical play here by Ramuccio, but I do wonder whether Ramuccio is actually losing considerable time right now and will try to make a pass happen after the Mulsanne corner, because surely he can't afford to stay behind the Chilean for the whole of this lap. Because if he does stay behind the Chilean for the whole of this lap, then what it will mean is that the Chilean has gained a positional advantage, albeit, well, the question will be, of course, is does the Chilean then go for one more quick stop in terms of switch onto the medium? Because we haven't seen him use the medium, to be fair. And Ramuccio is coming to the end of this stint. You can see that the fuel tank has not got more than this lap remaining in it. So he finds himself coming out really in a position where he's behind a driver on a different strategy, and it's blocking his strategy. And behind them, Hakkone and Spence are getting closer. They're now 4.1 seconds down on Ramuccio. That gap is closing up. So this is critical in terms of Ramuccio's aspirations, in the fact that he has got a bit of a situation to deal with in these two drivers. If they can sort it out, and look how Hakkone is being pushed along by Spence. The GTR driver is just sort of giving the Citroen a little bit of a push along. It's so difficult for the Citroen drivers here because they lose out so much in the straights, but as soon as they get to the second half of the circuit, once they've cleared the entry point to Indianapolis, it's literally their territory. They can reign supreme in terms of the overall handling, and it's a difficult one to be in. But you can see Dawson not gaining massively on these two guys. Dawson 2.9 seconds back and not gaining at an exceptional rate of knots. I think Dawson will be just thinking about maintaining that gap. But of course, the gap to leaders at this point, 33 seconds, but all of our drivers are now settling into their final few stints. The problem, of course, will be for the drivers at this point in the race with this conjecture is, what do they do about the extended stints on the softs? Do they start to make those soft tyres go longer? Do they go for faster stints where they just do less laps and push the car more aggressively? It will be time to tell, as Citroen has picked up a 1 second penalty, and that's a disaster for Citroen here, because it will mean that now he has got a huge amount of time to burn off, unless he can do it under lifting at some point and sit behind Cervence perhaps, as he's coming towards the end of the stint. I'm wondering if Cervence here has got enough fuel to get that GTR to the pits. It's very low on fuel. I think he might just have enough here, but he's going to have to do some early upshifts just as a safety measure as they're coming through the Chevrolet curves now to the right and to the left. You can see he'll chuck the car in. He's doing a very good job of staying right behind that Citroen. Cervence has got a lot of confidence in the handling of that GTR, and it's working out wonders for him as he's holding on to the back. But of course, the difficulty that he is having to an extent is the fact that as they come into the pits now, Cervence coming in and they're all piling into the pits, and Citroen burning that penalty there before coming in. Dawson now is being released, and Peroloco has come off of what was the hard tyre, and I think he's going to go into a set of softs now because he doesn't have enough fuel to do a complete lap unless he takes on a little bit of fuel and essentially does a smash and dash. But Dawson is going to have made his way up into P3 after his pit stop, and Plux will go for Francois. Let's see where they come out now. Plux is ahead of Francois and has really established his position ahead of the Dodge driver. These guys come through the final four chicane then to start lap number 20, and lap 21. And Plux, well, you've got some yellow flags out on circuit as well. I'm wondering if there's been a bit of an incident or whether it's just cars coming out. No, it's just cars coming out of the pits, and you see Plux and Francois thread themselves into P8 and P9, and they find themselves right behind the Citroen of Ramucho here. And Plux, spoke to prior to this race, was saying that he was expecting to make a push for the top 10. He's definitely making that push for the top 10 at the moment, but his momentum early on in the race seems to have dropped off a little bit, and he finds himself a bit further back now, which isn't terrible, we should point out, but it's just how it's worked out, and I think he just doesn't quite have the pace at this point in the race to be able to hold on to the other drivers. We can see Ramucho doing a good job of running after what is Peroloco ahead of him, and Plux can sit on board with that Aston Martin Vantage GT3 V12. You see, just simply building up the speed down the straight here, going up towards 280 kilometers an hour, starting to head into the red zone limiter here, and it'll be incredibly fast as he's getting that toe off of Ramucho. He's going to be breaking down for 290 kilometers an hour, and absolutely sensational top speed, and he's having to brake a little bit out of the toe there of Ramucho simply because of the fact that if he stayed in there, I think he was wondering if he was going to go into the back, so it helped him bleed a little bit of speed off. As we're hearing reports, something has gone wrong in the pits for Jaeger in the pits. I'd like to find out because there's a report of a bug there, but it looks as though Jaeger's doing okay. So there's nothing visibly wrong with Jaeger's car, but he's pulling over to the side track, and in fact he is running very slowly, Jaeger, at the moment, and he's letting drivers through. Something has gone very wrong for the Frenchman, but meanwhile Plux the Dark looking to make an attack on Ramucho here and not able to get it done this time around, but Plux is looking to gain some paces right now. The Aston Martin driver is feeling very fighty, and look at him, he's immediately going on the attack, and he's trying to use Namika's slipstream here, and Namika is providing a little bit of toe to both drivers, weaving back from left to right and right to left in order to give both drivers the equivalent slipstream here, and he wants to pull Plux, he wants to get past the Citroen, he feels the Citroen is holding up. I think Plux is the man on a mission right now to clear as many drivers before they come towards the next pit stop, because Plux has only got a couple more laps to go before he comes to the pits, whereas all these drivers, of course, have just done a pit stop, so any disruption he can cause to these guys right now will pay dividends for him in the end game. Brandon Ramucho, and you can see he's already dropping away. Plux starting, he's going to be out of that slipstream zone, but right on board with Plux. I think Plux is getting a double toe here. The Chevrolet and the Mercedes, he's going to go for a move. Surely Plux is going to look for a move here. It's going to be quite late if he's going to go away on the outside. He thinks better of it, and Peroloco is forming a bit of a truly train here in the fact that he's backing him up, and Plux goes very deep on the brakes and just catches it on the brakes. He has to use the emergency down shift in second gear there to stabilise that Aston Martin before it ran off onto the gravel, but Plux is feeling very, very fighting, and I think he's getting into a position where he just wants to try and get past that Mercedes in particular, but if he can get both done, that's even better for him. And we're just watching it back here, and what you'll see happens is he carries so much speed in that he just gets it a bit wrong on the brakes there, and he goes deep, but he catches it enough that he doesn't lose too much time, and Plux will keep coming back here. I think you're not going to see too much more before he's going to go for another attack on the Nika, and then potentially Peroloco. And as Peroloco is leading this pack around at the moment, it's 5 drivers very close on the circuit, and it's the closest we've seen in terms of all of these drivers out on the circuit for some time. And that's not a critique, but this is how all the strategies are coming together now that we've only got 35 minutes to go. We haven't got too much time left in this race, and this is where it all comes to life, because I suspect we're only going to see probably 1 or 2 more pit stops from each of our drivers, perhaps even a third pit stop, but probably a maximum of 2. And Nanika here doing everything he can to stay with Peroloco right now, but Flux, in the meanwhile, we feel as though he's got the legs on that Aston Martin to get past. But of course, he's probably going to have to pit at the end of this next lap. He's probably going to have to pit on lap 22. So this is his lap to disrupt Nanika's plans as he runs incredibly wide, Flux does, into turn 1 here, and he's getting closer and closer to the back of Nanika, and surely a move is going to run. And you can see Ramucho and Francois Light are both behind, and they're getting closer and closer as well. Nanika is becoming the cork in the bottle here, and as we look backwards from Flux's car and then look forward, you can see it is literally a case of who is going to be the first one to break the bubble or the order, and I think it is going to be Flux. As Flux gets it very wrong coming out of turn 6, now up into Tetra Rouge. Now, if Ramucho can nail this, he may be able to get a move done, as Peroloco picks up a penalty coming out of Tetra Rouge, and that means that the Chilean is going to have to burn some time somewhere, and he's going to fall back into the clutches of this fight. That's a disaster for the Chilean right now, as they're all charging on Ramucho. Look how close he is to the back, but Flux has got that toe off the Mercedes, and he's going to go for the move here as they come up into the first chicane, and Ramucho is going to try and follow through. He's going to try and use the Aston Martin drive. They're going to go 3 wide, but they're all settling down to an order, and it's a double move on Nanika by Flux and also Ramucho. They both get it done, and Nanika drops back to P7. But you've got to feel for Flux. He knows he's only got this 1 lap before he pits, surely. And on top of that, Ramucho and Nanika now will be able to have a go back at him. But I think Ramucho thinks, you know what, Flux, you've done a great job of getting past Nanika. I'm going to reward you now by not getting in your way. I'm going to give you a little push along because my Citroen hasn't got the straight line legs in order to get past. But then again, could we see a return from Nanika here? As you can see, Ramucho is just tucking a little bit out of slipstream here. As they come into braking for the second chicane, then Ramucho staying in position right now. They're staying in formation, and behind them, Francois Light is looking to get in on this, surely. I think Francois thinks he missed out a bit of an opportunity to get past Nanika down into the first chicane because he was right at the back of that train. He'll want a little bit of the action. But Ramucho right now doing a very good job of hanging in there behind Flux and using Flux as a tool to get past the faster in a straight line Mercedes. And this is really smart play by the Frenchman. If anything, he's really using the tactics to his advantage as Peroloco takes his penalty there and finds himself on the inside of the Mulsanne corner, and that means he was defensive in his position, and that has cost Ramucho some time, and Peroloco now finds himself needing to slot into the slipstream train. So we have got 5 drivers all charging down the Gulf Straight now towards Indianapolis, and Flux at the head of this pack, Ramucho behind, Peroloco right in the middle of it, having burned his penalty, and both Nanika and Francois getting very racy and getting all over the back. And you can see that Peroloco is looking for a move here as he goes to the inside to defend, and looking back from Francois' perspective, you can see that he's just simply biding his time, whereas Nanika finds that it's in a bit of a sandwich as our race leaders come into the pits. But that's not important right now. Our race leaders coming in with Kimi having 9 litres of fuel more than Medi. They change places out on track. But again, this pack of 5, well, Flux is going to be coming in at the end of this lap, we suspect. But Flux will be happy with the job he's done here because he's essentially put these drivers in a bit of a difficult position, which is they've lost time because of the fact he's gained over them when they've been on the fresher tyres. And Flux will think right now, I think in my opinion, if I was in Flux's shoes, that I will know that I can get past these guys even if I'm on an alternate strategy, and I've just got to get my strategy right. I've just got to do each lap as if it's the best lap of my life. And Nanika falling back off of the back of Peroloco. But remember, look at the slipstream train that's building here, folks. You can imagine he is feeling the dirty air of 3 cars in front of him through this sequence of corners. That is painful to drive it, and he's doing such a good job at keeping that in front end tightened up as Dawson comes into the pits from P3 for a mandatory soft stop here, where he's going to be putting in a fresh set of tyres and a fuel tank of fuel, as Flux comes into the pits as well from P4. And Nanika and all the gang here, bar Flux, will be coming through to start lap number 23. But the question will be, where does everybody come out in relation to one another? Now, of course, the big question mark will be over Dawson. Where does he come out in relation to this train of cars? And we don't see Dawson coming out of the pits right now. I think Dawson is going to come out behind all of this. He does. He comes out in P8. And that means Dawson now has, so he's current P9. Hakkone, Savent, they've all caught up to this. And that means Dawson is now in a horrific position. He's on fresh tyres, a full tank of fuel, and I think he's only due one more pit stop, but he has got to do it all to get past all of these drivers. Of course, if he can do it fast, and he can do it on the straight here, he's going to gain a huge amount of time, but this is not where Dawson wanted to be. He has fallen right down into the clutches of a battle for P3 when he did not want that at all. As we sit on board here, you can see from Dawson's perspective, look at that traffic jam of cars ahead of him. It's the equivalent of essentially coming out onto a motorway in rush hour. He has got to cut his way through the traffic as quickly as possible, and he's going to start off immediately with the section of Hakkone. Hakkone has put on the flashing indicators to say, go past Dawson, I know you're fast, just get it done. And Dawson is charging down here, and he'll be happy that one driver has been highly compliant, although the Citroen goes into the back of Dawson there. But I think that was just a little mini mistake, nothing major to worry about. But Hakkone decides to get out of the way of Dawson, and now Dawson has got a 2.8 second gap to close down to Savent ahead of him, but he will do that very quickly as there was contact. But as I say, I think it was just a little mistake and nothing fatal there, and Hakkone backed out of it immediately. But now the question on Dawson will be, how quickly does he close up to Savent ahead of him? The train is all there. I think Savent is actually going for a move here on Francois Light as they're coming up into the chicane. He's getting very close to Vence, in fact, and Dawson is going to be pushed along here by Hakkone as that gap sits at 3 seconds at the moment. But this is so frustrating for Dawson right now, surely, because he is at the back of a train which he's got to catch up to. At the moment, he's always got to do is follow the train, and well, he's got to catch up to it first because he is losing time. Look how much time he's losing on the straight. He's lost 2/10 in the fastest car down the straights here, it could be argued. And he's losing out massively because he's got nobody to tie him along. And he just hasn't got a slipstream partner right now. In fact, he's got one partner behind him who's giving him a little kiss on the backside every so often. And you can see Savent's going for a move on Francois Light here as they're coming down the Gulf Straight. And he backed out of it initially. I think Francois is feeling the pressure of the GTR driver all over the back of him. And I don't think it's going to be long. And Dawson's still holding off Hakkone, but I think Hakkone is just backed out and just wants to push the Aston Martin along. And Savent is putting some pressure on again. I don't think he's going to go for a move into Indianapolis. I think he's just going to back out of it. And both Dawson and Parks find themselves in the midst of Pax right now. Well, I say that Parks has dropped quite far back, but Parks has got a lot of work to put in if he wants to catch up to and usurp this pack of cars. Remember, Parks was at the head of this pack of cars before he came into the pit. He needs to find his way out ahead of it when the pit stops are done. But of course, he doesn't have a slipstream partner like Dawson. Both of them are going to lose time. The British drivers are in a bad position right now, it could be argued, and Ramuccio and Paraluco are going to war here up into the Porsche curves. And I think Ramuccio is doing everything he needs to hold off the Chevrolet driver right now, but the Chevrolet driver is still in a very good spot, holding on to the back of Ramuccio. And, well, I think Ramuccio will feel very happy with where he's sat, in that he's got no major pressure at this point. But the return will be, he'll feel that pressure off of Paraluco as they come onto the straights. But the Chilean, to be fair, has been very tactical in his approach to this race. I think every drop of fuel he can save, as Nanika picks up a 1 second penalty out of nowhere. I think that's for cutting probably one of the track limits at the Chevrolet curves, but that means Nanika now has to pull back again, and Savent is falling off the back of Francois Light, as you can see Nanika pulling over to the right now. Nanika is going to be in a drag race here, and I think he's almost collided into the side of Savent. Savent was observed at the last moment by Nanika. That was a near mistake from the Mercedes driver, only spotting the GTR at the last minute. But Dawson will now catch up to Nanika. He's not close enough to get in the tow, however, and Dawson has got to literally rev the guts out to get close enough to catch up. He's so far back at the moment, and I know it sounds silly, 2 seconds is so far back, but it is in this race right now. Less than 30 minutes to go. That is life or death in terms of Dawson's aspirations to finish on the podium. He can get that selection, and he's got to do it. As you see, battling into Tetra Rouge, and they're side by side of Francois Light versus Savent. I think Savent's got pushed off there because they were side by side into Tetra Rouge. It'd be good to see a replay of that. We're going to get a replay, so as they're coming up into the corner here, Savent was breathing down the neck of Francois, and Francois went wide at 5, and now coming into 6, Savent had to take to the outside, and he tried to hang it around the outside here. We don't do that into Tetra Rouge normally, and Francois parked it in, and Savent got pushed off, but he rejoined, and Francois immediately gave the place back due to the contact. So great sportsmanship by all the drivers involved there, and no penalties being accrued as a result of the sportsmanship showed. And you can can see Dawson is up into P7, so that battle there has enabled Dawson to get in the slipstream, and he's already up into the fight. And further back, you can see that we've got a battle going on for P11 and P12. We'll come back to that in a minute, most likely. But Dawson now is the man on a mission, and he's got 2 more cars to clear before he's able to get up into the battle for P4. And first off, it is Francois Light, who he's going to give a little bit of a push lifting, and he's lifted off the throttle there. I think what he recognises is we're coming up to a double braking zone here. By double braking, he's got 2 cars in front who are going to brake heavily. He can't make the move, but he will want to get the move done on at least one of these guys going out of the Mulsanne corner. Now, the problem with Francois is that in the Dodge, he has got incredible straight line speed to rival the Aston Martin, and that is something he has to be careful about, because if he doesn't get it right when he goes to the move, then Francois will be coming back at him at Indianapolis. But he's going to go for the move, Dawson, here, or at least he looks at it initially, and then he moves to the outside. I think he's trying to put our drivers off here because he's hanging the car behind, but he's just not able to effect to pass it, and he's losing time. He's losing considerable time in this, because you can see further up the road our P4 and P3 drivers, so that is Fabio Patilla and also Ramuccio, are pulling away, and they're pulling away at a good rate as Francois is now feeling the need to go side by side with Spencer. It's going to be 3 wide. They're going to go into the right-hand kink here before Indianapolis. 3 wide, and Dawson has to cut the curve there on the king, and Spencer literally gets reverse Moses manoeuvred by the 2 drivers here, and he doesn't pick up a penalty. Dawson, that was a smart positioning. You normally see the Moses manoeuvre when somebody goes between 2 cars down the centre of them, and Francois goes deep at Indianapolis, and Dawson looks to pounce. Does he go for the lunge? And he's going to go for it, I think. Oh, he's having to defend instead. And hold on a second, Francois has gone deep and he's lost it. Francois has dropped all the way down to P8, and Dawson is up into P5. Not the way he will have wanted to get it done, but he's got it done, Dawson. He has cleared the train, and that means now he's got to close down 6.5 seconds to Peroloco and Ramuccio, who are further up on circuit. But if anyone's going to do it now, it will be Dawson. He is pushing like an unchained monster right now. He sees that top 3 position and he wants it. Now, Francois will be pitting at the end of this lap. We know that because he's got no fuel remaining in the car, and also his rear left tyre in particular is absolutely shot of its grip. Behind him, Hakone is getting closer and closer. The Citroen driver here mounting the pressure on his fellow countryman ahead of him. So I think there's going to be a change in position very shortly as he's coming up into the final section. The final section, and Francois immediately indicated he's going into the pits. And we can also see that Nanika has come into the pits as well. But our other drivers, Savent and Dawson, continue to go around. Dawson, of course, because he's on a different strategy, and Savent because he can go one more lap. But Dawson now has got so much to do in terms of catching up with Peroloco and Ramuccio. And the big question will be, of course, now where does Flux come out into all of this? Because with 2 drivers pitting and all this fighting, that will gain Flux some time, as we see that Tenchu is still in P8. And we can see that Peroloco is actually catching up to the back of Ramuccio. He's really caught up over the course of the last lap, and these drivers coming to the end of their current stints, and I think it's not going to be long before we potentially see a move here for what is P3 on circuit currently, but could be arguably P5 or P4 in the standings once all the strategy is done. But of course, we've got 22 minutes to go, and I think these drivers are going to go for their one final stop, and that will be it. Whereas Dawson is expected to make one more stop. If he's going to make another pit stop, it will be him. But it's all to play for, and Nanika has come back out in P8, so ahead of Flux. So Flux has not been able to jump some of these guys as of yet. But Peroloco coming down now and not gaining enough. You can see it looking further back as we jump over towards what are some of our lower down drivers. So looking at, I think, what's going to be Karma very shortly in P13, you can see that Jaeger is coming to the pits. I think Jaeger has had some issues with regards to the pits, and that's why the car's parked up there. Meanwhile, Karma just simply running around at the rear of the field, and then Cobra quite away up, 19 seconds up, and 3 seconds off of Francois, who's just pitted. So you can see that Cobra, the 2 Dodge drivers, find themselves close out on track, and then Francois up in P11 chasing up the Flux to duck the moment. But Flux is a little way up ahead of him, as we've also got some flashing hazard lights left from Cobra. I think that might just be a mistake, or perhaps he's saying hello to our cameraman there. Flux 3.8 seconds ahead of Francois, who we're watching at the moment, watching Francois live. And you can see that Francois putting in everything. He's putting the fuel to go to the end. I believe that's a fuel tank to go to the end. And these will be a set of soft tyres to take him to the end as well. So he has not got any more mandated pit stops. I think Francois will just need to do his best to manage these tyres over the remaining 21 minutes, which will translate into approximately 5 laps. Now, Flux, of course, has a big question over him in terms of will he be going to the end? Now, based on the amount of fuel being used, I think Flux is due for one final stop, because that does not look like enough fuel to get him to the end of the race. I may be wrong, however. He's got 21 minutes to go here, and he's being quite aggressive at the moment. I think Plucks recognises the fact he's got to get a leg on here if he wants to catch up, because he was not able to catch up to Nanika or Tenchu after their pit stops. I think Plucks finds himself all the way down in P10 right now. And speaking of Nanika, he's chasing after Tenchu right now. They are a bit further up the road. Nanika almost in the slipstream zone of the GTR driver of Tenchu, currently sitting at 8.5 tenths down. Getting closer and closer, but I think it's going to be just a little bit longer before we see some action between these two. Tenchu, of course, in that P7 position, P8 position, and then we've got Savence, who we're going to jump over to now, sitting in P6 and finding himself still chasing after Dawson, who is a bit further up, but Dawson is pulling away at a significant rate of knots, and Savence, who made the stint go long, will be pitting at the end of lap 25 here, because you can see he's got no fuel remaining and those tyres are shod, as are car cones. But to be fair, these two drivers have done a very good job of disrupting Dawson's race, and they may find that Dawson has dropped into their battle if Dawson has to make one final pit stop. These guys seem to have made it so they only need to take this one last stop before the end of their races. We can see Ramucho still holding on to P3 at the moment against Peroloco. Both of these drivers, I think, going into pits, and Ramucho picking up a 1 second penalty there for abusing track limits coming out of the final Chevrolet curve. There you can see he put all four wheels beyond the white lines, and I think what it was that if he went too long on the exit curve. As you can see, Peroloco much faster on pit entry compared to Ramucho, literally sniffing the back of him. And meanwhile, talk about fastest laps on the circuit, Medi sitting on that 3:52.4 at the moment, but Kimi finds himself approximately what was about 2 tenths faster there after sector 1. You can see Dawson has now been released up into P3 as all the pack chasing him have come into the pits. But, well, our race leaders up front, they're so close to one another, and Nanika coming in for a set of hards, so he's had to take that second mandatory stop. But Kimi just literally kissing the back of Medi's car at the moment, and if these drivers continue like this, what I can imagine is it will be a race to the finish between them after their final stop, because they're both due another stop. They have not got the fuel to get to the end, and the tyre life's not going to be there on those stops. But these guys have played it so masterfully tactically. They find themselves 44 seconds ahead of Dawson in third right now. They've literally run away with this one. Now, it was perhaps predicted simply because running in the Aston Martin, very strong car at this circuit, and Medi being a very strong driver, and Kimi being a very strong driver. They're both very good drivers, and all 14 of our drivers here today are what you would call top split drivers. You would see these guys in a top split lobby in GT Sports FIA races, but these two really in a top split of their own today. They just simply run away with this one. And Dawson's sitting in P3, still doing very well for himself, and he's got a gap of 21.8 seconds ahead of Peroloco. And I think what Dawson will decide to do in the very near future is go for his final pit stop. If he's planning one more pit stop, it will have to be on this lap, because he can't afford for the guys behind him to close up too much more. And you can see Peroloco with 21.7 seconds now. That gap, and they're all in the rear of your camera shot in the far distance. What a lovely camera shot there, showing you how far back they are compared to Dawson. They will gain on the Aston Martin driver over the course of each lap now, because they are on fresher tyres, so you can imagine they've got greater grip to exploit, whereas Dawson is running out of grip now. So I suspect he will pit either at the end of this lap or the next lap and go to emergency stop. And he's putting in personal bests right now, which would indicate he is pushing hard to hold on to P3. So there's going to be huge questions over what remains at the end in terms of who's going to come home with that third place. If I had to be a betting man right now, I think Dawson will be able to pull this off. However, there's only one problem, and that is he's got to have the race of his life and nail everyone. The man who's currently on target for that P3, I would argue, is this man right here, Peroloco. Remember, the Chilean started at the back, and he's going to finish by the current standings P4, potentially P3 after starting back in P14. He has done an absolutely brilliant race. Unless there's a potential mandatory stop we have not had yet from him, I think he's done enough to stay ahead of everyone. But we will, of course, find out. We'll let you know as soon as we know. And behind him, Ramucho. To be fair, Ramucho, the French driver, has done such a good job in terms of just running the car so well. In the fact that he's been sat back here, he hasn't been too aggressive. Yet there's been moments where he's had to work the car hard, but he's just simply tagged along to the pace of the drivers ahead of him. And he finds now, whilst he's out of the slipstream of the Corvette in front of him, he's still got a comfortable gap to Plux the Duck, who's come out after all of this in 6th. But remember, Plux is due for another stop. We know that because he hasn't got the tyre life or the fuel to go to the end. And Plux is at the head of a train right now, and actually feeling a huge amount of pressure from Spence, who is looking into Indianapolis but can't find the place to make the move here. that Spence is doing a very strong job of putting the pressure on Plux. I think Plux here must be coming up for a pit stop soon, and this isn't working out for Plux. If anything, it's actually going backwards for Plux right now, because he's going to have to take one more stop. He knows he has to do it, and well, Spence and that will not have to take a pit stop. So that could see Plux drop potentially all the way down to about P10 or P11 if this continues, and that will be a disaster for the British driver, as the Frenchman will just be released and allowed to run up the road all happy and dandy. And Spence here really putting in a fantastic run of form in the second half of this race with 15 minutes to go, and he's all over the back of the driver in front of him as he's trying to get a move done, and he just can't get it at the moment. And the Aston Martin driver is struggling. He's falling back further and further, and I think Plux is going to be pitting. If not on this lap, it will be on the next lap, surely, because otherwise Spence is going to go for a move. He's getting so close to the back of that Aston Martin. Will Plux pit at the end of this lap? No, he's not coming. He's going to go one more lap. He's going to extend this one and just simply run it as ragged as he can. And this is going to cost Spence time, of course, to be right on board with the GTR driver, who goes out to the gravel and almost loses it there, just catches it running out of the final corner for putting one wheel out on the gravel. And you can see he just simply gets a little bit too deep on exit here. The front left goes onto the gravel, the rear right, sorry, the rear left follows it. And well, he tried to get on that power and the car got chucked, but he caught it. Well caught, that man. And he's still right behind Plux. Plux is getting no relief at this point as they're coming through turns 4, 5 and 6 then. And you're going to see that GTR will close up here as the Aston Martin is understeering very heavily through these corners, and you can see how Plux is having to break that car down so hard in order to keep it going round at a pace. And Spence is being held up now. You can see it. Spence is clearly being held up, and he'll want to get this done. But of course, now here's the big problem for him: 3 straights. And what is the Aston Martin very strong for? 3 straights. And what is the Nissan GTR not known for as much anymore? The straights. But then again, he's going to have to run this time as he goes down the side here, and he'll be on the inside for the opening chicane, and Plux trying to tuck in immediately behind him here, and then switching over a bit. I think he's trying to avoid picking too much of an overspeed into the first chicane, but now watch how Plux is going to come back here, and this is where the Aston Martin will literally rip treads as Plux goes a little sideways. That will cost him about a tenth of time there that he could have gained. But now watch, you can see the rear of the camera shot, the Aston Martin looks quite far back. Well, items may appear closer than they seem in the camera, folks, as Aston Martin is getting closer and closer and closer, and he goes to the return move down the left-hand side, and now he will take the inside position as they come into the second chicane. And now, of course, it will be Spence's turn to do the same back on the third part of the straight, and then try to line it up so Plux gets a full run out of the Mulsanne corner, and then puts himself ahead going into Indianapolis. Of course, it's harder said than done, as Plux and Spence are trading places and trading lap time. Now they're coming down, of course, they've got through the initial right-hand kink, and you're going to see, I think Plux is actually going to go a little bit more defensive on this one, because this could be critical. Alternatively, perhaps he's expecting Spence to go for the move, but Spence actually doing something a bit different here. Spence has decided not to go for the move, and this is smart. Now, why do I say that? Because what Spence knows is that Plux, if he got ahead of Plux, Plux would go for the final move into Indianapolis here. But because Spence has stayed right behind Plux, and now they've got the one long straight with the double kink up towards Indianapolis, look, he's going to go to the outside. Of all the places to do it, going around to the outside is where I wouldn't expect it. And in fact, I think Spence has actually cost himself a huge amount of time, because you can see it's going to be a drag race as our race leaders go into the pits. But forget about that. Let's stay with this. They're going to drag race into Indianapolis. Now, will Plux put it in? I think Plux is going to put it into the corner, and he has. He's just simply kept the car there, and he's gone defensive under braking, and Spence has not been able to get past, and Plux just nails it going into the corner there and holds it together. And well, the British driver, they're doing everything he can to hold the Frenchman behind him, as Spence gets frustrated on the throttle there and almost throws it away at Arnage, but holds on once again. You can see Spence just getting on the throttle too soon out of some of these corners, and it's not working out. And with our race leaders coming out the pits, with Kim ahead of Medi once again with 11.5 minutes to go. Now it's going to be down to who's going to win the race for them, but we'll come back to that in a second. As you can see, Spence still all over the back of Plux, and Dawson comes into the pits. Now this is critical for Dawson to remember. He has got to do a quick stop here to see where he comes out, and we'll keep our eyes on that. But right now, Spence cannot get the move down Plux, and look how slow Plux is. These corners here coming through the Chevrolet curves. Now it's no fault of his own. I think Plux has just picked up a penalty for running a little wide there coming out of the final corner in the series. No, he's just kept on board, and Dawson will be coming out of the pits shortly. I think he's dropped down into P5 as Plux comes into the pits then. And where is Dawson going to come out after all this as Ramucho comes out and Dawson coming out of the pits, and Dawson finds himself coming out in P4 just behind Periloco. So Periloco has done enough to get himself ahead and get up into P3, but not Ramucho. Now this is crunch time. Dawson literally has to go hunting for P3 if he wants to get third place and beat Periloco. He's got to do it out on track. It did not work out on strategy, although it has worked out relatively well for the British driver. He's now got to go full attack mode. He's got to put in qualifying laps now. He's got to now every corner, every straight, every sector as if it's a qualifying lap, and you're going to see that immediately. He is going to respond here, and look, out of Tetrarouge already in the first sector alone, he has pulled 2 tenths out on Periloco, and he is going on a charge here. Coming down onto the Mulsanne straight, then you will see him now absolutely abuse the gears of this Aston Martin. He won't care about fuel saving anymore. He'll know that he's fueled the car enough to get to the end. He won't have to worry about Ramucho behind. The Citroen driver will not have the legs in his car to catch up to Dawson unless he absolutely puts it through the roof in 6th gear in that Citroen, which will cost a huge amount of fuel. So now it is a game of who is going to hold on and pick up P3. And meanwhile, up front, of course, we've got Kimi, who is leading Mehdi at the moment, but that could all change because we know that Mehdi appears to have been the faster driver out of the pair. But Mehdi, look at the gap, actually. I say that through the pit stop and the fact that Kimi has done so much fuel saving, the gap between these two is 1.5 seconds. But you can imagine Mehdi will now respond, owning that fastest lap. Mehdi has definitely got something planned in the pipes here. And I think with what is 9.5 minutes to go, so we have 2 laps to go for these guys after this current lap. I think Mehdi will look to essentially build up the speed, build it up, and then go on the attack on that final lap, because that gap at the moment is stabilising. But of course, the question will be, can Kimi match him? Can Kimi hold on to this lead by matching Mehdi's pace? It'll be interesting to see, and we will find out over the course of the remaining race distance. And these guys have got plenty of time to battle because they've got 43 seconds over third place. They don't have to worry about a third place man getting involved in the battle for the lead. It is between these 2 guys, but it's who's going to be on the top step of the podium. That is the big question. But as they're coming down, then you can see Periloco at the moment doing enough to hold off Dawson. In fact, he's pulled out 2.2 seconds, or 2 seconds over Dawson. And Dawson about 2.3 seconds over Ramucho. And I think the Chevrolet driver is showing a bit more into Indianapolis by comparison to the Aston Martin driver. But again, they're pretty well matched in, as Ramucho is not able to gain too much. And now as they're coming down then into the braking zone for the corner I just mentioned, you can see that Dawson here is having to throw the car into the corner as much as he can, and he's just not gaining enough. And he runs to the full whip. Then you can see 2 wheels literally kissing the gravel very gently. And now coming through our Narge, doing a very, very strong job of coming out of the corner and behind Svens and Hakone are going to go to war, and Hakone is only a little bit outside that slipstream zone at the moment, just finding himself at 10th and getting a bit sideways out of our Narge, and that's going to cost him the time he needs to catch up, and he's not quite able to get into that slipstream zone, and he needs it here so much, the Citroen driver, because that GTR will just pull away on the straights. It'll gradually pull off into the distance, and then you'll have to literally put in all the work in the final few corners, so the Porsche curves and the Chevrolet curves, if he wants to close up. And that's where it gets so difficult for him. As we look further back, we're going to look at Nanika at this point, and we're going to see in the battle for P9, Nanika doing a good job of holding on there with Tenchu 3.1 seconds behind him. We haven't really seen too much of Tenchu, the other GTR driver, but he's had a very quiet race. He's been in amongst the battles, and Plux the Duck 4.2 seconds behind him. Isn't closing up at a significant rate of knots here, so I don't think you're going to see Plux really getting a move on here, or it's going to be on the final lap if he's going to get into that top 10. But Plux has really lost out here in terms of the pit stops and the strategy, which has been unfortunate for him. He's just found himself coming out at the wrong time from the pits. We've got Jaeger who's stuck in the pits. So we do have a retirement in the form of BFR's Jaeger here. So not all 14 drivers will finish this race. But Cobra, meanwhile, sitting in P12. He's got 8 seconds behind on Plux the Duck, and he's 29 seconds ahead of Karma. So I think Cobra will think that he's secure in P12 right now. He's not going to be gaining on anyone. But there's a long way back to Karma in last place, picking up another penalty somewhere out on circuit, probably at Indianapolis, and needing to burn that. And it just hasn't been Karma's day today. Mercedes drivers have not had a good day at all at the office. Just hasn't worked out as he goes into the wall at the Porsche curves there, and you can see I think Karma's getting a bit tired now. He's going into that wall and grazing it that hard is a sign of not nailing things up. But as we jump back up towards the front, then we can see there has been a switch between Mehdi and Kimi. I think Mehdi's got it done, and Dawson is closing on Peroloco. So Peroloco, remember, coming to the end of lap 28 was 2 seconds ahead, and Dawson has closed that down on lap 29 thus far with 1.5 laps to go. He's closed it down to what is 1.5 seconds, but of course Peroloco will have an ace up his sleeve surely, or something planned. Although then again, I say that, look at how Dawson is stripping the time out of the acceleration zone out of the first Mulsanne chicane. And the Aston Martin, of course, is fast, but I didn't expect it to be pulling the time coming out of the chicanes. I thought it would be towards the top end, but in fact, we're right on board here. See, that Corvette is just getting ever so closer in the picture as they're coming up towards the braking zone for the second Mulsanne chicane, then braking just after the 100 board. Dawson going as deep as possible under braking right now. His last lap being a 3:51.7, a very fast lap from the British driver. I don't know whether that's the fastest lap of all of our drivers here, but that is a phenomenal lap. As he's coming down now towards the third part of Mulsanne Straight and coming into the Mulsanne corner then. Well, in fact, it wasn't the fastest lap, but he is going very quickly. He's getting personal best at the moment. And that makes sense actually, because Dawson had an outlap on the previous lap. You can see it's in the corners. It seems to be where Peroloco is gaining initially. But again, there Dawson's pulled a 10th out on him. He has pulled a 10th out on the Chevrolet driver, and a further 10th now as they're going into the acceleration procedure for the run up to Indianapolis. And Ramucho has fallen back a further 2 seconds out of all of this. So it's going to be Dawson who could potentially be on for the battle for P3 right at the end of this one. And if he does, well, it is going to be a turn for the books here, because Peroloco, if he's able to come in P3 here, will have pulled a phenomenal strategic gambit. But can Dawson just get close enough to take away the P3 from the Chilean right at the end? And we see Dawson just nailing Indianapolis. Both drivers, look at how they're literally taking the same lines. They're matching one another. Peroloco getting very unstable on entry to Arnage there, and that means Dawson has pulled another 10th, and Dawson is on a personal best right now. He's 3 tenths faster than his previous best. His previous best you'd have to look at, which was a 3:54, 3:50. This is going to be probably a 3:53 lap. And Dawson, I think he's only got a little bit more to go. He's got 1.5 tenths more to extract out of that gap to Peroloco, and then he'll be in that slipstream zone for that final lap. And speaking of those final laps, well, these guys will definitely only have 1 lap to go. The guys ahead, I think, will maybe be doing a 31st lap, depending on how quick they can get around, but it's going to be close. It is going to be so tight here, and you can see that Peroloco has just done a little bit of a mistake there coming out the Chevrolet curves, and that gap is now below 8 tenths, and now Dawson is going to gain massively with the slipstream here. So long as he nails the Ford chicanes here, he's going to fill the dirty air in front of him, and that'll give him confirmation, all the confirmation he needs, that all he has to do is attack every corner now. It's his last lap, it is lap 30, and he's just at a 3:53.8, a phenomenal lap, although Mehdi has gone with the fastest lap improved to 3:52.0. I think Mehdi's got it in the bag up at the front right now, unless Kimi can pull off a blinder on the final lap. But Dawson is getting closer and closer, and he's just breathing down the Chilean's neck at the moment, and Peroloco has done nothing wrong all race. He's run the perfect race pretty much, but can Dawson just snatch it away from him as they come through the first sector? And you can see Dawson has pulled 3 tenths out of the Chilean initially, but the Chilean bites back. He's pulled 2 tenths in total in sector 1, and Dawson is going faster. This man is on a mission, and he's coming through Tetra Rouge there, and it was all nailed up perfectly. He didn't go right, and he's right out the backside of the Chevrolet driver right now, and now he's got to think about this one tactically. He's got to think, right, I cannot afford to get into a back and forth battle here. I've got to try and get the move done on the Corvette and then just break away, and he's going for it immediately. He's gone for it coming down into the braking zone for the first chicane, and look, he's gone defensive until the braking point. I think what he's trying to send the signal to Peroloco is, if you're going to go for it, you're going to have to go for it very late. Peroloco right now, as we switch over to him, he's close, but look at the tyre wear on that Corvette. That tyre wear is holding him back massively. And you can see that he's just not able to get the traction out of the chicane. And I think here, unless he's able to go for a very late lunge, I think Dawson has done it, ladies and gentlemen. Unless Dawson makes a mistake, I think he has got P3. But we say that, look, Peroloco is coming back very gradually. He's getting ever closer right now. because they're coming into the braking zone for the second chicane. Is he going to go for a move, Paraloco? No, he does not go for the move, and Dawson does get it hooked up very nicely. He gets it hooked up almost perfectly, runs a little deep, however, and that means he's not able to pull a gap of 4 attempts here, and it means the Chevrolet driver is going to come back now. Will Dawson go fully defensive into the Mulsanne corner? As you can see, right on board the Chevrolet driver right now, fuel is getting critical as well. He's getting closer and closer, and is he going to go for a lunge here, or is he going to stay behind and then risk it all at Indianapolis? He's staying behind right now, and he's trail braking in initially. So I think what it is, it's going to be the acceleration race now. Who is going to get away? And Dawson runs wide there and picks up a bit of gravel on his left-hand tyres. Now, did he pick up a penalty for that? Because if he did, that could be Dawson's aspirations in tatters here. It doesn't look like he's picked up a penalty, and there's a huge gap back to Ramuccio. You don't have to worry about those guys anymore. And Dawson did not pick up a penalty, I don't think. But Dawson very slow initially here. In fact, I think the Chevrolet driver is now really putting in, and they're going to go side by side into Indianapolis. And Paraloco has gone around the outside. Of course, Dawson can come back here. Dawson can look to make a return move because they've got one more long acceleration zone before it becomes all the technical corners. And that is the run from Arnage to the Porsche curves here. And Dawson looks for the move into Arnage, doesn't have it. But now it's going to be who can nail the acceleration here. And Dawson has had a very good run. The Chevrolet driver has also done the same. Paraloco has had a good run as well, and Paraloco has pulled to the inside immediately. If Dawson's going to do this, he's got to be brave. He's got to lunge it in, and he's just got to go for it. And Paraloco trying to squeeze Dawson, but Dawson's trying to go to the inside. Will he go for the lunge under braking? And he doesn't go for it. And that means now he's got to have a sensational set of curves, the Porsche curves, and also the Chevrolet curves, if he's going to get this done, because these guys are on their final lap. Correct me if I'm wrong, they are on their final lap, and that means it all will come down to the final couple of corners. And Paraloco is struggling to maintain his apexes here, and Dawson is all over the back now. He's only got 2 chicanes to go. If he's going to do, he's got to be going into the chicanes here, and you can see Paraloco going defensive. I think Paraloco's done enough unless he makes a mistake. I think Paraloco has held on for P3, and Dawson has backed out of it. That means that after 2 hours, ladies and gentlemen, the first drivers to finish their races, unless we've got our calculations wrong here, will be Paraloco, Kono in P3 and Dawson in P4. What a fantastic battle between those 2 drivers. P5 goes to Ramuccio from France in the Citroen, and then behind them, Sarthe holds on to P6 in the Nissan GTR ahead of Hakone, who comes home in P7. Spin it across the line, a little bit of theatrics there. Then it's going to be Francois Light in the Dodge, the first of our Dodge drivers, coming home in P8. We'll be happy with that result, all things considered. And then we've got 8 seconds back to Nanika in the Mercedes, the lead Mercedes driver in this group, coming home in P9. It wasn't speed safe for Nanika, and well, he's burning the penalty here, and he just gets across the line in time as Tenchu comes across, and Buck's stuck in P10 and P11 respectively. Buck's missing out on the top 10 finish today. Cobra in P12, again, Dodge just haven't had it today, and Cobra won't be too happy with that result, I don't think, although he's shaking his head in agreement, or disagreement you could say. And you can see Karma in P13 coming around right now to complete his race as well. As he comes towards the final couple of corners, we're going to see that Karma completes his race in P13. Come up to 2 chicanes then. 1 more chicane to go. I think here Karma can just simply ease it off and relax now. All of our drivers working so hard after 2 hours of endurance, spinning it across the line, and plenty of reverse, in fact, a little bit of a drift across the line. And then the last of our drivers running out on circuit at the moment, but on their final lap, so it will be Jaeger who is going to finish the race. They managed to get the car fixed, although he is 7 laps down on everybody, but credit to Jaeger. He's going to be coming home. But the most important thing right now is we see Medi has picked up a half-second penalty coming out of the right corner, and that means Kimi is going to have to run. And these guys are side by side now, and we could have a change in the race win at the very last moment. Although it looks like Kimi hasn't, well, they're going to come across in formation here, surely. I think. Well, I don't think Kimi's going to go for the win here. I think he's actually going to hold off, although I'm not sure what's going on here, folks. I think it might be a little bit of a short to show Aston Martin have been dominant today and team orders have been applied, because I think in the championship it's Medi who is the one with the greatest potential for winning the Drivers' Championship here. So I think they're both bringing it home in a good manner. And as they come across then to finish on Marge, and now it's not to go. I mean, this is just dominance from the 2 drivers in terms of they have had this race themselves all the way to the end. It's been incredible work from the pair of them. And well, it's been phenomenal by them. Jaeger, meanwhile, is going to come home in P14. Haven't had a good race. He'll be happy with this result. And Jaeger, well, he's had a good race until the pit stop error and the issue in the pits. But it's going to be Mehdi and Kimi are coming home, nose to tail in formation then. Literally training it through here. It's a cool down lap for these guys. They've done everything they needed to dominate this race. And then up alongside one another once again. This is very cheeky from the two Aston Martin drivers, but to be fair, they've earned it. Now all they need to do is get through the final chicane. And well, it means that Mehdi is going to come home as our race winner, ladies and gentlemen, just ahead of Kimi as they come across the line then. And those are your final standings. Our race winner, Mehdi, 59. That was a phenomenal race. One absolutely phenomenal finale. Oh, goodness me. But to all those viewing, we hope you've enjoyed the race. And and I'm just going to quickly outro the race. But thank you to all those of you who tuned in. Hope you've enjoyed. And well, there's your final results, ladies and gentlemen. Mehdi coming home in P1 ahead of Kimi. Both of the Aston Martin drivers showing a dominant amount of force, finishing with 31 laps. A lap ahead of Peroloco, who did the absolutely incredible strategic gambit, which took him from the back to P3, just ahead of Dawson. Those guys only being separated by under a second. And then P5, going to Ramuccio, Savent's holding on for P6, Hakone in a quiet P7, Francois in P8, Nanika and Tenchu rounding off our top 10, and Plux just missing out in that top 10. Cobra in P12. Karma having not the best of race in P13, but Jaeger missing out due to an error in the pits. But that's how it stands. And the fastest lap went to Mehdi on lap 29 with a 3:52.0. But that's it, folks. Hope you've enjoyed. And thank you to our race hosts for putting this one on. And if you have, be sure to let us know. But until next time, as always, stay safe, stay well, stay smiling, and remember to stay on track. Good night.